Chapter 16. Advancing into the finals. Hearing Jianchen words, Ka Di Chiuli's eyes brightened. You said so yourself, so don't you dare try to say otherwise later. Ka Di Chiuli clearly had no desire to let Jianchen prepare himself, so before she could even finish her sentence, she had already started to dash towards him. Just like the first blow, she leapt up into the air and lashed her leg out to kick him in the face, but this time the speed of her kick was much faster than her original one. Jianchen gave an odd smile as the kick came closer. Just like he said earlier, Jianchen didn't bother to dodge, but instead, as the kick was right in front of his face, both of his hands lashed out and grabbed onto Ka Di Chiuli's calf. Exerting a decent amount of strength while twisting around, he whirled her around in one smooth motion. As he threw her, Ka Di Chiuli cried out in panic as she was spun around by Jianchen. Many of the surrounding students watching the event became dumbstruck. Not only did it seem like Jianchen did not care for the fairer and threw such a beautiful lady into the air in such a crude way, he had also defeated the last 6 opponents in the same manner. Under the arena, Ka Dian felt the veins in his forehead throb as he watched his younger sister get mistreated in such a way. A murderous intent was focused on Jianchen as he watched him. If it weren't for the vice headmaster Biyao presiding over the match nearby, then Ka Di-yun would have charged onto the arena long ago to teach Jianchen a lesson. Jianchen's 2 arms were almost like strong pincers, clamping down onto her legs, as he spun her around twice before finally letting go. At that moment, one could only see Ka Di Chiuli's beautiful body streak across the sky in an arc, before finally flying out of the arena, and crashing into a group of people in the audience. He had learned this trick from Tai Ta. After watching Tai Ta in some of his matches, he saw that he had done a similar method to easily toss his opponents out of the arena. However, Jianchen had to admit, this method was a very easy trick to pull off for a quick but easy victory, and could be done to certain people with ease. With only a tiny bit of disdain for the people in the audience who helped Ka Di Chiuli back to her feet, Jianchen smirked as the referee proclaimed him the winner, before walking off the stage slowly. Blankly looking at Jianchen walk off the arena, Ka Di Chiuli's face fell. Since she was born, she had been pampered by thousands of people as she grew. For her to suffer humiliation from being tossed into the air after being spun around like a top, she had felt that she lost face as well as being wronged, despite not getting injured. As she thought about this, Ka Di Chiuli's eyes started to tear up, and she eventually began to leak out streams of tears as she cried silently to herself. As Jianchen walked down from the arena, Ka Di Chiuli's brother, Ka Di-yun, blocked his path. Glaring at him icily, he growled, "Kid, you really have some fucking courage to treat my sister like that." Jianchen lazily glanced over at the furious Ka Di-yun and snorted. Without saying anything, Jianchen walked away from him. Words were not worth wasting on him, because Jianchen couldn't stand to hear Ka Di-yun try to use his clan's influence to bully others. Watching Jianchen walk farther and farther away from him, Ka Di-yun's own face grew even more somber. With the end of Jianchen's match, the final 4 names were called out. In the end, it was Changyang Xiang Tian, Tai Ta, Ka Di Liang, and Tian Mu Xiong that remained. As far as Tai Ta was concerned, Jianchen was not at all surprised that he had made it. However, Jianchen did not think that Ka Di Liang would unexpectedly make it into the top 4. There was also the 4th participant, Tian Mu Xiong. His age wasn't all that different from Ka Di Chiuli. He had a medium-sized body, and a pale complexion. Although he was young, there was no doubt that he was handsome, with a perfect balance of his facial structures. Sitting on top of the platform was the vice headmaster, Biyao, who slowly looked over the 4 remaining students. With a small nod and a laugh, he announced, "It would appear that this year's freshmen are much stronger than the freshmen before them. I can only hope that our Kargath Academy will be able to boast of someone just as strong after." After announcing the 4 remaining students, they were given an hour of rest before continuing on with the competition. However, by some miraculous chance, Jianchen's drawn opponent was Ka Di Liang, while Tai Ta's opponent was Tian Mu Xiong. Under the arena, Ka Di-yun and his siblings gathered at the bottom and watched. Ka Di Chiuli's eyes were starting to become red and inflamed by this point. "Second brother, you have to teach him a lesson later," Ka Di Chiuli said with unrestrained fury to Ka Di Liang before the match started. Noticing his sister's red eyes and her tear-stained face, Ka Diliang couldn't help but feel extremely furious as he spoke. Sister Chioli, don't worry. Even if I get penalized by the academy, your second brother will definitely teach him a lesson. Humph, what a savage kid. To think that he would dare treat our sister like this, he really does have a death wish. Sister, please don't worry, I guarantee you, that kid will definitely only feel suffering for as long as he lives in this academy. Although the headmaster sides with the poor people, he is by no means a commoner. Even if I beat him until he's a cripple, the headmaster won't say a thing. At the very most, he'll just scold us. Ka Diyun's face looked as if he swallowed poison. When it came to their sister, both Ka Diyun and Ka Diliang cared greatly for her. When Jian Shen had treated their sister in such a way, he had already earned extreme hatred from both of them. Soon, Jian Shen and Ka Diliang both walked onto the arena, and waited for the start of the match. Right as the gong sounded, Ka Diliang dashed towards Jian Shen and tried to slam his fist into Jian Shen's stomach. Jian Shen nimbly dodged Ka Diliang's attack, while returning the blow with his own fist that was even faster than his opponent's. Pang! Before Ka Diliang could even respond, Jian Shen's fist had already made contact with his back. The force of his punch was so strong, it forced Ka Diliang to stagger backwards, before falling to his knees. After one blow, Jian Shen didn't bother to hold back. Both of his legs went into motion as he quickly ran towards where Ka Diliang was kneeling. All of a sudden, the originally staggering Ka Diliang suddenly lost his footing once more and was sent flying again. After being hit, he flew 2 meters towards the edge of the ring, almost knocking him out of it, though half of his body was already hanging out of it. Watching this display of might, every student watching Jian Shen all cried out in surprise. They had never imagined that in a single engagement, the victor would be so readily decided. This was something that every student thought was amazing. The 9th layer Saint Force student Ka Diliang was being beaten so easily by the 8th Saint Force layer Jian Shen. Seeing half of Ka Diliang's body sticking out from the ring, both Ka Dichioli's and Ka Diyun's hearts leapt out from their chests and into their throats. AI, how can second brother be this careless? How annoying. He'd better not lose to a brat like him. Ka Dichioli cried as she stamped her foot in anger. Though the longer she looked at Ka Diliang, the more easily one could tell her face was full of concern for her older brother. Ka Diyun let out a breath in exasperation. What is second brother doing for him to be this careless and lose to a brat who's only at the 8th Saint Force? On top of the platform, the vice headmaster Bai En smiled excitedly as he said, the freshmen we picked up this year are definitely jewels. One has been blessed by the heavens, while the other I can polish and shine in the future. While his attacks are simple, there is a strange sort of mystery to him. Every single time there is a crucial point in the match, he unleashes highly accurate moves with almost instantaneous reactions. These two students truly do require closer nurturing. I believe that in the future, these two will be great experts within the Tian Yuan continent. I'd better discuss this with the headmaster later. On the arena, Ka Diliang scrambled to pick himself back up, his forehead already dripping with cold sweat. If his body had slipped just a few more inches, then there would be no doubt that his body would have fallen down from the arena. And then if he truly did lose to an 8th Saint Force layer student in such a disgraceful manner, he would definitely have been labeled as a great disgrace. When Ka Diliang crawled back up and turned himself around, his surroundings suddenly blurred, and he was suddenly aware of an acute sense of pain in his stomach before he could fully comprehend what was happening. But then, his body felt as light as a feather, before he realized the stage was growing smaller and smaller. The next thing he knew, his body impacted the ground below, and his previously spotless white robes now sported a single dusty footprint. Blankly standing up from the ground, Ka Diliang looked all around himself, before he fully comprehended what had just happened. Indignation burst forth from his eyes, as he shot Jian Shen a malicious glare. Although he had reached the 9th layer, he had ultimately been beaten by a student who had only reached the 8th layer, and felt his defeat was an extreme waste. Every time he thought of this, Ka Diliang's heart filled with endless anger. To him, this was definitely a huge disgrace. Ka Dian walked up to Ka Diliang and said, second brother, you've disappointed me. You have really lost face for our Ka Di clan. After dropping these words, Ka Di Yun didn't spare a second glance at Ka Di Liang, and immediately left the area. Hearing Ka Di Yun's words, Ka Di Liang's face immediately turned beyond ugly. Second brother, you were too careless. Although you said that you would help me teach him a lesson, it ultimately became you being the one that was taught. Ka Di Chioli said resentfully in a disappointed voice, her tone quite indignant. Hearing this, Ka Di Liang's face changed as well. Before growling, this was the extent of his luck. It was because of this arena that he won. If we were to change places, then there would be no way he would be an opponent for me. Third sister, don't worry, I will definitely teach him a lesson in the future. Ka Di Chioli began to think. She felt that his reasoning had some truth to it. Slowly nodding her head, she said, second brother, you'll have to teach him a lesson for sure next time. Ka Di Liang patted his chest, and solemnly vowed, don't worry, third sister. Leave this to me. Not too long after Jian Chen had won his match, the match between Tai Ta and Tian Mu Xiong also started to wrap up. Although Tai Ta's Saint Force was lower than his opponent by a single layer, his heavenly blessed strength helped make up for this deficiency. In the end, he relied on the experience he had learned from hunting beasts and was finally able to beat Tian Mu Xiong by a narrow victory. Along with Jian Chen, he became one of the two finalists. By the end of the next match, one of the two will emerge victorious and be crowned the freshman ruler. Chapter 17, Freshman Ruler. After resting for 2 hours, the competition finals finally started. Jian Chen and Tai Ta walked into the arena together, before walking to opposite ends 10 meters apart. There were over 1,000 students watching the arena already, while even more people were trying to find seats. Jian Chen looked at Tai Ta with a smile as he spoke. He praised Tai Ta. Tai Ta, I didn't think you were this amazing to be able to end up in the finals. Hearing Jian Chen's compliment, Tai Ta's face reddened from embarrassment, though it was obvious that he was very happy to hear the praise. With an honest laugh, Tai Ta spoke in a low voice, Changyang Xiang Tian, you're just as amazing. Stretching his arms and legs, Jian Chen laughed, Tai Ta, this is the final round. Only one of us will be crowned the freshman ruler, so you need to fight your hardest. If you beat me, then you'll be the champion. By winning, you'll earn a Class 3 monster core that is worth a few hundred purple coins. It'll be worth enough to feed your family for a lifetime. Tai Ta grew pumped up after hearing Jian Chen talk. Changyang Xiang Tian, I'll definitely use all of my strength, so you'd better prepare yourself. Jian Chen could only laugh and nod. I won't be that easy to defeat. Boom. As the gong sounded to indicate the beginning of the match, Tai Ta immediately rushed forward after the sound. Tai Ta rushed at Jian Chen, and immediately reached out to grab him with both hands. He planned to use his heavenly blessed strength to lift and throw Jian Chen out of the arena. Realizing his plan, Jian Chen laughed. He was already extremely familiar with Tai Ta's style of fighting. For every single match so far, Tai Ta had used the same strategy, but it had worked nicely. If Jian Chen was caught by him, then it would be extremely difficult to escape from Tai Ta's grasp. Jian Chen retreated a few steps to escape from Tai Ta's reach. Clenching his left hand into a fist, he used around 80% of his strength to strike at his chest. Jian Chen's fist was well-timed and fast, not allowing Tai Ta any time to react at all. Pung! Jian Chen's fist let out a muffled sound on impact against Tai Ta's chest. However, Jian Chen's look of satisfaction slowly changed, while Tai Ta had a look of amazement. What he had punched did not feel like a human at all. Instead, his fist had felt like it had smashed against a wall. Not only was Tai Ta strong, but his physical body was extremely robust, so robust that it was actually beyond belief. Jian Chen's punch, however, had forced Tai Ta to stagger backwards, but only for a moment. Roaring out loud, he charged at Jian Chen once more with both of his hands outstretched. With a punch using only 80% of his strength, Jian Chen didn't even leave a mark on Tai Ta's skin. Jian Chen began to feel excitement as he watched Tai Ta come closer with his fists. He didn't bother to dodge or flee. Instead, he prepared to use 100% of his power to strike back with his own hands. The two fists struck against each other in midair, and the impact created a loud sound. It was so loud that everyone in the crowd below the arena could hear it as clear as day. As the two fists made contact, Jian Chen's feet couldn't help but slide backwards at least 10 meters before finally stopping. His right hand had already started to tremble, so it was clear to see that Jian Chen had taken more damage than given. Even though he had surpassed the average cultivation level for Saint Force, he was still far from the level where he could easily ignore damage from something like this. Tai Ta, on the other hand, only slid backwards 2 meters. His face showed no outward emotion, and he appeared to not have suffered even the smallest amount of damage. Jian Chen rubbed at his reddening hand. After 2 confrontations, he now fully understood how foolish it was to engage with Tai Ta straight on. Tai Ta's strength wasn't just used for intimidation, his body was actually inconceivably strong. Even someone a level stronger than Tai Ta could not be his equal. The only thing that could lead to victory against Tai Ta was if one relied on speed. Tai Ta, your strength has already far surpassed my expectations, but I'll be using my full strength now. Jian Chen said as he walked forward. Tai Ta laughed, come then, Changyang Xiang Tian, you won't be able to hurt me. Tai Ta's tone was filled with a fierce conviction. Jian Chen stopped his idle chatter as well. When the distance between him and Tai Ta had been reduced to only 5 to 6 meters, his footsteps suddenly changed. His legs became a mysterious blur that suddenly reappeared behind Tai Ta. Before Tai Ta could even react, 2 fierce fists landed consecutive blows on his back. Dong! 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 A constant series of muffled blows came ringing out from the arena, almost as if it was just a single continuous line of sounds. Under such heavy attacks, even Tai Ta's body couldn't help but falter forward so much that he was left with very little time to turn around. Ha! Tai Ta snarled in anger as he tried to steady himself. Suddenly, he turned around with his fists out and tried to smash them into Jian Chen. The moment when Tai Ta tried to attack Jian Chen, he lightly leapt 2 meters into the air. Narrowly dodging Tai Ta's fist, Jian Chen used both of his legs to kick at Tai Ta from midair. Both of his legs held formidable power, and they thrusted towards Tai Ta's back. Dong! 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 Jian Chen lashed out with his feet several times before landing back onto the ground. By this point, Tai Ta's face had been kicked by Jian Chen multiple times, causing his face to bruise all over. Immediately after landing on the ground, Jian Chen turned around on the floor and bent his legs down without pausing. His left leg revolved in a 180-degree arc, his right leg swept at Tai Ta's own legs. Pung! Tai Ta's leg crumbled down below him, but he immediately bounced back up, and snarled as he rushed at Jian Chen. Jian Chen and Tai Ta began to engage in another close combat situation, but with Tai Ta's God-given strength and his frighteningly robust body, Jian Chen had no chance of winning against him. Since Jian Chen had already experienced it twice, he had thought of a countermeasure for this situation. Although it wasn't the best idea, he had no other ways of fighting against him. Jian Chen had decided to rely on his nimbleness to fight against Tai Ta. Even though Tai Ta's body was extremely strong, Jian Chen had been attacking the same place on Tai Ta's body to make it so that Tai Ta would feel so much pain, he would eventually be forced to grimace. The following situation was now becoming one-sided. With Jian Chen relying on the experience he had accumulated over the past world to constantly beat Tai Ta so much that he could only run around with his hands over his head. Although at times Tai Ta had found some opportunities to fight back, he was not able to hurt Jian Chen. His attacks could not even touch Jian Chen's clothes at all. At this display, every student in the audience could only watch the match in shock. No matter how fast Jian Chen was with his martial arts, his speed had far outstripped the average person, causing all of the students to look on with great interest, as it was something they had never witnessed before. On the top of the platform, Biyao gasped in admiration as he watched Jian Chen. This kid is definitely a unique one. His battle experience is rich, and his speed isn't slow at all either. It seems this student is called Changyang Xiang Tian, so judging from his name, he is from Lor City's Changyang clan. It seems that I really will have to make a report to the headmaster later. As the battle continued to persist, Tai Ta finally reached his limit. He cried out loud, and exclaimed, "Stop, stop. I can't fight anymore, I give up." Jianghu immediately stopped his attack and smiled brightly at Tai Ta. "Why aren't you fighting anymore?" Tai Ta rubbed at the reddening spots where Jianghu had repeatedly hit with a miserable face and said sadly, "You move so fast that I can't even see you clearly. There's no way I'd be able to attack you, so the entire time was just you wailing on me." Laughing, Jianghu asked, "So you're just going to give up the number 1 spot then?" Although Jianghu hadn't held back as he fought against Tai Ta, his skin was so thick and his body was so strong, that there was barely any serious damage done to him at all. Tai Ta nodded his head and spoke in a muffled voice, "I won't be able to beat you, so the number 1 spot isn't mine to have. Second place is already decent enough. A Class 2 monster core can be sold for a decent price too." Afterwards, the 2 students walked off the stage while the 3rd place winner was announced. Ka Diliang and Tian Mu Xiong, who had fought it out against each other in a battle to determine the winner. In the end, it was Tian Mu Xiong who had won and claimed the title of 3rd place. After the quota for the top 3 players was met, Jianghu was called up onto the platform. As the vice headmaster Bai En walked towards him, he glanced at Jianghu with no small amount of admiration. Immediately looking away, he turned his head to look at the 1,000 students in the audience and announced, "Dear students, this year's freshman competition has finally come to a conclusion. I declare the freshman ruler of this year to be the student Changyang Xiang Tian, who is an 8th Saint Force Layer practitioner." The vice headmaster Bai En spoke in a firm voice, causing everyone to applaud and cheer. But as some of the 9th Saint Force Layer students heard the new freshman ruler was at the 8th Saint Force Layer, many of them couldn't accept that. However, they could only grumble out their displeasure. But Jianghu's strength was something they could accept. Some of them had even been dazzled by the way he fought, and his speed was something that not many people could dismiss. This year's freshmen are really too useless. In front of so many people that had reached the 9th Saint Force level, the final freshman ruler ended up being a youth at the 8th Saint Force Layer. This is really too embarrassing. That's true, today's freshmen were really too weak. Not only was the title of freshman ruler taken by a person at the 8th Saint Force Layer, I heard that the suntanned youth in 2nd place was also someone who was only at the 8th Saint Force Layer. I really don't know what these freshmen had practiced to the 9th Saint Force Layer for. The 2 people that spoke were seniors wearing the academy uniform. Their tone were filled with a mocking voice towards those who had lost against the 2. Hearing the 2 students complain, another one of the seniors replied to them, "You guys shouldn't even say anything. It's not that those freshmen who reached the 9th Saint Force Layer were weak, but it's because those 8th Saint Force Layer students were stronger than them by a large margin. That suntanned kid had strength that could scare anyone. Don't tell me you guys didn't see how those 9th Saint Force Layer students were easily thrown out of the arena. If it were us that were fighting instead, I'm sure that we wouldn't have been better off than the freshmen." As for that 1st place freshman, his strength was even more terrifying. Did you guys also miss how fast he was moving around and attacking? Even if it were us in that same situation, we would have a hard time trying to dodge his attacks. Other than those 2 students, many other seniors of the academy were also discussing the matches amongst themselves. They had already been at the academy for so many years, but this year's competition had left them speechless. This year's freshman batch had many students who reached the 9th Saint Force Layer, but no one had expected that the top 2 students would be 8th Saint Force Layer students. Soon after, Jianghu obtained the Class 3 Monster Core as a reward. It was a deep red in color, and was bigger than the Monster Core than the one his brother had given him earlier. Holding his hand up, Jianghu could clearly feel the huge amount of power radiating from the core. The huge amount of energy in the core and the true chi in his previous world had a very small difference, but as far as Jianghu was concerned, the energy coming from the core was extremely huge. Aside from the monster core, Jianghu had also received a medal that was cast in complete gold with a decorative design written on it. From what Jianghu had heard, there was no information on the medal he had won, so he had no idea what use the medal was for. But as he was trying to figure it out, the vice headmaster Bai En explained to him, "This medal can only be rewarded to the 1st place winner of every freshman competition. As long as you have this, then you will be given a Class 1 monster core every month. Other than that, the medal allows the wearer to access the first 5 layers of the library. Chapter 18. The Monster Core's cultivation rate support. Every month a Class 1 monster core will be given, as well as free access to the first 5 levels of the library. Hearing Bian's explanation, Jian Chen's heart swelled up in marvel. Could it be that the students weren't able to even get a monster core every month? And who would have thought that the library would have a restriction imposed on it? Receiving the medal, Jian Chen had already planned to ask his brother Changyang about this later. He had already been in this academy for 3 or 4 days, but 3 of the days had been completely occupied by the martial arts competition. Even for the first day, he had barely half the day to himself, so he had very little time to find out more about the academy. After Jian Chen exited from the arena, both Tai Ta and Tian Muxiong walked forward to accept their own prizes. After the ending ceremony, the crowd of students had already begun to disperse. Fourth brother, you're seriously amazing. You really did win first place in the competition. Once father hears about this, he'll definitely be very happy about this. As the two walked towards his dorm, Changyang kept chattering away happily with Jian Chen. As the two continued to talk, Jian Chen started to laugh, as he couldn't help but feel the warm feelings he had remembered from his mother. If mother found out about this, she would definitely be beyond happy. Jian Chen thought to himself. In a flash, Changyang and Jian Chen arrived at the dorms and entered Jian Chen's room. Changyang impatiently asked Jian Chen, "Fourth brother, hurry up and show me the Class 3 monster core." Looking at Changyang's still excited expression, Jian Chen laughed and brought out the monster core from his space belt, handing it over to Changyang. Changyang took the core into his hand and turned it around endlessly, almost as if it was a treasured object. He clicked his tongue in admiration. "Fourth brother, you're seriously amazing, to immediately get a Class 3 monster core straight after entering the academy. Your older brother has already been at this academy for over 2 years, and the most I ever got was a Class 2 monster core. Moreover, I had to pay money for it." Hearing this, Jian Chen could only chuckle. "Big brother, I've heard that you've already reached the peak of the 10th layer and will soon break through to the saint level. You should take this Class 3 monster core." Jian Chen didn't regard the monster core as an important item, and although the Class 3 monster core would increase the rate of cultivation, Jian Chen didn't need it at all. Changyang was stunned at Jian Chen's words, but he quickly regained his wits and placed the Class 3 monster core back within Jian Chen's hands and said, "That won't do." This Class 3 monster core was something that fourth brother got after going through a painstaking amount of trouble. How could your big brother take something like this? Looking at the newly returned Class 3 monster core, Jian Chen smiled. He truly admired his big brother's actions just then. At the very least, he wouldn't have to worry that Changyang would be like third brother Changyang and become an obstacle towards him. Once again, Jian Chen placed the Class 3 monster core in Changyang's hands. "Big brother, this Class 3 monster core would be best with you." This time, Jian Chen really wanted Changyang to accept the monster core. Definitely not. Changyang's refusal came out strong and clear, without any hesitation. He handed the monster core back to Jian Chen and said, "Fourth brother, this monster core should be used by you. This is your reward for being the freshman ruler. This item is definitely not something your big brother would want from you." Seeing how persistent his brother Changyang was, Jian Chen could only helplessly take back the Class 3 monster core. After that, Jian Chen began to ask his older brother a few questions regarding the affairs of the academy. It had taken 3 hours for Changyang to carefully explain every single rule that Jian Chen didn't understand about the academy, increasing Jian Chen's familiarity with the academy. First was Kargath Academy's headmaster, who favored students that weren't from a noble background. If he found a noble bullying a commoner, the student would definitely not be able to escape from punishment. Regarding battles between nobles, he would turn a blind eye, as long as it didn't turn into a major deal. Other than that, he didn't care about them at all. Also, within the Kargath Academy, one would have to reach the Great Saint level in order to graduate. Those who graduate had the choice to remain in the academy, or with the Kargath Academy's recommendation, they could vow loyalty to a kingdom and join their army. Those with a great amount of potential would be able to earn a higher salary with the Academy's recommendation. Within the Academy, those under the level of a saint would have the chance to receive a Class 1 monster core every month to use to help their cultivations. The students who were at the saint level and condensed a saint weapon would be able to earn a Class 2 monster core every month. Aside from this, these students would also be able to go to the forest 20 miles away from the Kargath Academy to hunt magical beasts for their cores. Although the forest wasn't big, it still took up around 10 kilometers of area. The magical beasts inside the forest were all set free by the Academy, but most of them were generally low-leveled magical beasts. Their attack strengths were amongst the lowest of the beasts, and receiving a serious injury was unlikely. Kargath Academy bred these low-leveled magical beasts for the students to practice their martial arts in a real combat situation, as well as to allow the magical beasts to adapt to the wild. The strongest magical beast in the forest was no stronger than a Class 2 beast, while many of the animals were just regular wild beasts who couldn't even measure up to a Class 1 magical beast. However, if a Class 2 magical beast were to appear, then the Academy would send out a few experts to take care of the monster in order to prevent the students from getting hurt. The forest was separated into 3 regions. The first region was full of wild beasts who didn't even reach the level of a Class 1 magical beast. The second region was a place where Class 1 magical beasts dwelled. The final region was full of Class 2 magical beasts. All 3 areas had been successfully sealed and blockaded against the other areas by the previous generations of the headmaster, so no one would have to worry about the monsters escaping from the forest. The Academy also had a library, which was separated into 7 levels. Inside the library was a great amount of books, with an abundant amount of information. Aside from books about the continent's history, there were also many secret training manuals for practitioners. Students who had not yet reached saint level would only be able to access the first 2 levels of the library. The moment a student reaches the level of a saint and condenses her saint force into a saint weapon, then she would be able to enter the 3rd and 4th levels. For any level above the 4th, the only people who could enter were teachers, or students at great saint level. By the time Changyang who had finished telling Jianshan about the information regarding the school, it was already quite late during the night. Changyang who thus hurried out of Jianshan's dorm, and ran towards his own dormitory. Meanwhile, at the top of a tower that was situated in the center of Kargath Academy, the vice-headmaster Biyao respectfully stood in front of an office desk. In front of him was actually the headmaster Jianshan had met before. The headmaster of Kargath Academy extended his arm and stroked his long beard. Indifferently looking at the vice-headmaster, he said, "Biyao, did you say that the name of the freshman who won the competition was a kid called Changyang Xiangtian?" The headmaster's tone held a hint of surprise. Biyao nodded his head and said, "Yes, headmaster, I found out that Changyang Xiangtian is quite remarkable. He is only at the 8th layer of Saint Force, but can already defeat freshmen that are at the 9th layer. His attacks are not only aggressive, but also quite agile and nimble. It also seems that he has plenty of combat experience, which does not match up with the strength he should have. Even Tai Ta, who has a body with heavenly force, lost to Jianshan in a simple manner, unable to even counterattack." Hearing this, the headmaster furrowed his brows and asked, "Biyao, is what you're saying really true? Is Changyang Xiangtian really that amazing?" "Headmaster, everything I said is the truth," said Biyao in a firm voice. The headmaster slowly rose from his chair and muttered, "It looks like this kid Changyang Xiangtian is a bigger genius than Changbai said. He didn't use any sort of monster core or heavenly treasure, and was still able to reach the 8th layer of the Saint Force by the age of 15. How astonishing of a feat to think that he also has an abundant amount of battle experience. Something like this is unfathomable." Even the headmaster's voice carried a hint of astonishment. Hearing the headmaster mumble to himself, Biyao also had an astonished look on his face. The fact that he had not used any heavenly treasure or monster core to reach the 8th layer by the age of 15 was a type of talent within the Jessen kingdom that could only be regarded as something a gifted genius could have. "Headmaster, it looks like this Changyang Xiangtian has a limitless future." Biyao sighed. The headmaster nodded his head and said, as long as he can continue to grow this way, then the skill he displayed today will definitely develop into something greater. It looks like our Kargath Academy will finally be able to boast of a strong individual, as long as he doesn't die on the road to greatness. As long as he really grows into a strong individual of the Tian Yuan continent, then not only our Kargath Academy become well known, but our Jessan Kingdom's reputation within the continent would also increase. Right now, the surrounding kingdoms around us are getting more and more restless. After these 10 or so years, if our Jessan Kingdom doesn't have any strong individuals, then I'm afraid that sooner or later, one of the kingdoms around us will attack. After hearing this, Bian's face gradually grew solemn. The Jessan Kingdom was neither a big kingdom nor a small kingdom, but it had fertile lands that many of the surrounding kingdoms were envious of. If it were not for the 6 experts of Jessan Kingdom, then the surrounding kingdoms would have long since attacked them. Bian pondered for a bit, before carefully asking, "Headmaster, should we consider giving away Class 1 and 2 monster cores to Changyang Xiang Tian for free then? That way, we could improve our relationship with him." The headmaster considered the vice-headmaster's proposal for a bit, before shaking his head. "That won't be possible. Although using a monster core can be used to increase one's cultivation rate, there are side effects of abusing it. Changyang Xiang Tian is currently very young. We cannot allow him to become addicted to using monster cores. Otherwise, when he reaches the later levels, his foundation will be very shaky, which will obstruct his future progress. At his current age, he should quietly focus on self-discipline. It would help lay down the foundations and increase his chance of success in making a breakthrough." "Yes, Headmaster." Bian understands what to do now. Bian didn't dare to act against the headmaster. Besides, what the headmaster had said made plenty of sense. "Headmaster, how do you plan to handle Tai Ta?" Bian asked. "Tomorrow morning, bring Tai Ta to me. If he is willing, I will take him in as a personal disciple." The headmaster replied after thinking about it for a while. "Yes, Headmaster." After Changyang who left his room, Jian Chen sat on his bed and contemplated the new information for a while. Afterwards, he crossed his legs, and with the Class 3 monster core in his hand, he began to absorb the energy from the Class 3 monster core into his body. Inside the monster core was the soul of a magical beast. The energy within was not only pure, but also fairly strong. According to what Changyang Hu had said, the moment Jianshin started to absorb the monster core, then he would start to feel a long stream of pure and strong energy flowing out of the core. It would flow up through his arm, and slowly be absorbed within his body. Jianshin manipulated the constant outward flow from the monster core to guide the energy into his body. Constantly refining the energy into his body, he gradually changed the energy into Saint Force, before gradually absorbing it into his Dantian. Using a monster core to cultivate really did increase the cultivation rate by many times. Because of the normal way of cultivation, one would normally have to absorb the world essence slowly before finally converting to one's own energy, but that couldn't compare to the speed of a monster core. The natural chi couldn't compare to the pure soul energy of a monster core. After all, the soul of a monster core was the purest part of the beast. Using the energy from a monster core, the speed of cultivation would increase by 10 times. For this reason, monster cores were extremely expensive, even if it was only a Class 1 monster core. Multiple rays of light gradually appeared between the sky and land. The bright red sun finally struggled to climb into the sky, sending forth the soft and warm rays of sunlight. The golden sunlight with tens of thousands of rays of light illuminated the earth, as if the whole ground was dyed into a golden carpet. At the same time, the Jian Shen who was sitting cross-legged on the bed slowly opened his eyes. His eyes showed a happy expression, and the corners of his mouth also showed a hint of a smile. After last night's cultivation, Jian Shen had received many gains, equivalent to a few days' worth of training. By absorbing the power within the magical stone, Jian Shen's cultivation speed had actually increased by 10 times. Right now, he could clearly feel that the saint power inside his body had increased by a ton. Based on his calculations, he wasn't far from reaching the 9th Saint Force layer. According to his current speed, at most it would only take a weekend's worth of time to reach the 9th Saint Force layer. Of course, this was only Jian Chen's estimate. The exact values had to be tested. If the fact that the amount of power that Jian Chen had absorbed from within the magical stone was 10 times more than the amount normally gained from cultivating was discovered by others, they would definitely be devastated from shock. Even though the magical stone could quickly increase the rate of cultivation, it was also far from achieving the frightening pace of 10 times faster under normal circumstances. The average person using the magical stone to cultivate would normally only increase cultivation rate by 2 or 3 times. Even if the person was slightly more powerful, his or her cultivation rate would only be raised by 6 or 7 times. Considering the fact that Jian Chen's power wasn't even saint level, the fact that he could increase his cultivation rate by 10 times was definitely an extremely frightening pace. Seeing the magic stone in his hands, although the stone's color didn't change at all, Jian Chen clearly felt that the magic stone had shrunk by a circle after being gripped in his hand for the whole time. After leaving the dorm, Jian Chen directly arrived at the dining hall. This morning, the dining hall's breakfast was a bit more plentiful. Besides from a glass of magical beast milk, there was also some magical beast meat. Jian Chen had eaten quite a bit of magical beast meat in the Changyang household, and the taste was quite delicious. In his previous world, Jian Chen had never eaten such savory meat before. Chapter 19, Inconvenience in a Flash. 3 days had already passed. Although the 3 days were not long, it still allowed Jian Chen to become more accustomed to the lifestyle and environment in Kargath Academy. Within these 3 days, other than Jian Chen participating in classes on the first day, he had spent his time on the other 2 days either cultivating in his room, or wandering around the library. Due to the fact that the curriculum taught by the teachers of the academy revolved around how one should behave, what should be done in a dangerous situation, and a few skills one would need in order to survive out in the areas outside the cities, Jian Chen felt that these things weren't even worth learning. He was a wanderer in his previous life. With his experience, he could teach those teachers how the class should be taught. With his battle experience and ability to live wherever in the world, he could teach both the teachers and the students by himself. As the teacher's experience with battle was not at all extensive, it could not even be compared to Jian Chen's. The next morning, Jian Chen put on the academy uniform and headed straight for the library after eating a meal at the dining hall. The academy was very lax about their classes. If one wanted to attend, then they could attend. If one didn't want to attend, then that was no problem either. After all, most of the nobles and children of rich families had already been tutored since young, so they had knowledge that could rival some of the teachers, but they lacked the experience. Therefore, the classes were pretty much only for the commoners to learn from. It was very rare that a noble would attend a class, and if they did, then it was a minor noble. Arriving at the first level of the library, Jian Chen took a few books, and began to eagerly read them at a table in the reading area. Kargath Academy's library was expansive, and there was a generous amount of books on almost every subject. It was vastly superior to the library back in Changyang Mansion, and Jian Chen could find many books that couldn't be found back at home, helping him understand the world to a better extent. Right now, the book in Jian Chen's hands was an introduction book to all of the magical beasts that could be found in the Tianyuan continent. There were many different kinds of magical beasts. No matter if the beast could walk or fly, the amount of species amounted to over 1,000. The book even mentioned that there were still many magical beasts left undiscovered, and for the magical beasts that didn't live within the deep abyss of the mountain range of magical beasts, then they lived in the endless ocean. That was an area that even the strongest of people had trouble traveling to. As Jian Chen immersed himself in studying, a 16 to 17-year-old female student suddenly came walking through the doors. The female was extraordinarily pretty, and she also wore the academy uniform. Her long and beautiful hair was carefully braided into tiny ponytails, causing her face to look even more gorgeous. But on her face was an extremely haughty expression. One look at her would reveal that she was from a noble family. This female was actually Ka Di Chiolio of the Ka Di clan. Ka Di Chiolio entered the library and walked over to the bookshelf, before casually walking on over the reading area with a book in hand. She glanced over at the other students reading there, but the moment her eyes swept over to the area with the tables, she saw the back of Jian Chen, causing her to immediately stop where she was and stand there in surprise. Ka Di Chiolio focused onto Jian Chen's back, the light in her eyes never ceasing to flicker with emotion. Just thinking about how, a few days ago, she had been grabbed by the leg and casually thrown out of the arena without regard to her well-being, caused her to feel fury within herself. To her, that event was an unforgettable humiliation. The memory caused her face to boil over in anger before she snorted. No longer in the mood to read a book, she tossed it aside and stamped out of the library while gnashing at her teeth. Changyang Xiang Tian, I'll definitely show you one day. But Jian Chen did not notice Ka Di Chiolio at all, since he was completely focused on the book he was reading. No one would dare cause trouble in the library, so Jian Chen didn't bother keeping his guard up in it. After Ka Di Chioli left the library, she immediately found her second brother, Ka Di Liang, who was practicing his martial arts alone in the forest. Seeing Ka Di Chioli walk over, Ka Di Liang stopped his movements and laughed. Third sister, didn't you say you were going to the library? Why are you looking for me here then? In his heart, he still dearly loved his younger sister. Ka Di Chioli walked up to him with a grimace. Second brother, did you not say you would help me teach Changyang Xiang Tian a lesson? Immediately after hearing Changyang Xiang Tian, the smile on Ka Di Liang's face disappeared, and a gloomy expression replaced it. He had been brooding over the freshman competition for the past few days, and since he had been defeated by an 8th St. Force layer student in such an ugly way, Ka Di Liang would never forget feeling that memory. That very kick was the single memoriam of his disgrace. Ka Di Chioli was furious as she spoke. Second brother, Changyang Xiang Tian was in the library today. We should go over there and teach him a lesson. Yes, of course, this time we will definitely be the winners. Come with me, third sister. Ka Di Liang started to walk towards the library with determination. There was no way he would admit defeat to Jian Chen. He had blamed his loss the other day due to his carelessness. It was because he had held back that he had lost to Jian Chen. This time the high and mighty Ka Di Liang would not accept defeat. Ka Di Chioli started to show excitement. This time, second brother must definitely give the brat Changyang Xiang Tian a lesson he'll never forget, she said, as she followed him to the library. Even though the two of them were both at the 9th layer of St. Force, she knew that she was still no match for her older brother. And if Ka Di Liang were to lose against Changyang Xiang Tian, then there would be no way she would be able to win. At the library, Jian Chen was still deeply engrossed with his book. Hello, do you mind if I sit down here? At this moment, a crisp voice came from the side of Jian Chen. Although he was deeply engrossed in his book, Jian Chen's soul was formidably strong, and brought him back to awareness. Reflexively turning his head, Jian Chen saw a 17 to 18-year-old female standing right next to him. She wore an academy uniform, and had long black hair cascading down her shoulders. She had a refined, but kind smile, with eyes that looked curiously at Jian Chen. With her cherry-red lips, there were people who were practically fighting each other to get closer to her. Although she was only 17 to 18, her body was so delicately refined that the academy uniform nicely accentuated her. Currently, the girl was hugging a thick book close to her. Jian Chen casually looked at her before turning around to look around the room. He hadn't realized that all of the tables were so full that not a single spot was left to sit down. Looking back to the beautiful female, Jian Chen answered, "Go ahead." Returning his eyes back to his book, he didn't bother to look at her even though she was so pretty. The girl looked at the engrossed Jian Chen with a strange look. Her eyes shined with a peculiar look as she sat down. "Thank you," she said gently. Her voice was gentle-sounding. Anyone who heard her talk would feel comforted. Jian Chen didn't hear her words however, as he was already too absorbed in reading his book again. In his eyes, he could only see the book. The girl looked at Jian Chen with curiosity again, but she didn't say anything, and sat down with her book she was holding. She looked graceful as she slowly thumbed through her book, even though it was such a simple action. This gracefulness was an inherent talent of a noble, and suited her well. The library was very peaceful. Even though there weren't that many people, none of them made a sound, as they concentrated on their respective books. At that moment, a male and a female student came through the gates of the library. It was the siblings, Ka Di Liang and Ka Di Chioli. Second brother, look, he's right over there. Ka Di Chioli pointed at Jian Chen. Ka Di Liang looked to where Ka Di Chioli was pointing, and sure enough, he saw the all-too-familiar body figure. He looked on with disdain as he advanced towards him with his head held high and an arrogant face. With his head high and chest out, he walked towards Jian Chen with Ka Di Chiuli closely trailing behind. Pung! The moment Ka Di Liang got to the table Jian Chen was at, he slammed his hand onto the table, causing a large sound to echo out into the previously silent room. The sudden noise attracted the attentions of all the people reading, and their gazes all moved away from their books. One by one they began to observe Jian Chen's table. Aside from a few people furrowing their brows, most people carried amused expressions. Jian Chen knit his brows, and slowly lifted his head. He looked straight at Ka Di Liang, and said heavily with a hint of anger, "What are you doing?" At this moment, even the girl sitting across from Jian Chen had furrowed her brows, and she looked at Ka Di Liang in annoyance, her face also carrying hints of anger. The sudden loud noise by her ear had scared her while she was peacefully absorbed in reading her book. Ka Di Liang looked at Jian Chen with contempt, and haughtily said, "Changyang Xiang Tian, I, Ka Di Liang, formally want to request a duel. Do you dare to accept?" Ka Di Liang's voice resonated through the entire first floor of the library, as if he were afraid nobody would be able to hear it. Duel. Jian Chen's face showed a hint of disdain, and he lightly snorted, "I'm not interested, so please leave this area immediately. Don't disturb my reading, I don't have the luxury of wasting time on you." Realizing that Jian Chen was not seeing him as his equal, Ka Di Liang's eyes flashed with anger. Glaring at Jian Chen, he ground his teeth, and forcefully squeezed out the words, "Do you dare to or not?" Chapter 20, challenged. Jian Chen couldn't help but feel fury from Ka Di Liang's arrogance. Holding his own head up to look at him with disdain, Jian Chen said, "You were defeated by me before, what right do you have to demand a challenge from me?" Even now, Jian Chen's own tone carried a hint of arrogance that he had carried over from his previous world. This was a habitual attitude that somehow came out by accident. Hearing Jian Chen's words, Ka Di Liang's handsome face went deathly white. Extreme anger flashed through his eyes, but he didn't dare to break the pacifistic rules of the library, otherwise he would have long since attacked Jian Chen. Even Ka Di Chiuli, who was standing by her brother's side, was indignant. Glaring at Jian Chen, she started to jeer, "Humph, you won't even accept my brother's challenge to a duel, what kind of man are you?" Hearing Ka Di Chiuli back him up, Ka Di Liang's eyes brightened up and felt re-energized. "That's right, not accepting a duel, that's what a coward does. Changyang Xiang Tian, I'll be waiting for you at the fighting arena. If you admit that you're a coward, then don't come. Third sister, let's go to the arena." After that, Ka Di Liang glared at Jian Chen before turning around to exit the library. "Humph, Changyang Xiang Tian, you better come, you're a coward if you don't show up." Ka Di Chiuli cried out as she followed her brother. "Changyang Xiang Tian, isn't that the new freshman ruler from the competition?" "Seems about right, I heard that Changyang Xiang Tian is at the 8th Saint Force layer but he ended up beating several students who were a layer higher, how amazing." After Ka Di Chiuli left, the entire library started to buzz with comments. Everyone was starting to comment about the freshman ruler, Changyang Xiang Tian. Even the girl who was sitting next to Jian Chen had a small look of astonishment as she looked at him. Her eyes were blinking rapidly from this development, and it was clear to see that she had not expected Jian Chen to be the freshman ruler. Jian Chen slowly clasped shut the book in his hand, with a face that was unsightly to see. After the two siblings from the Ka Di clan disturbed him, he was no longer in the mood to read. Plus, Jian Chen had no other choice but to accept the challenge after it was issued, otherwise the entire academy would look down on him. Although Jian Chen didn't really care about his own reputation, he was one of the symbols of the Changyang clan. Since his older brother wasn't around, he would have to take up the challenge himself to make sure the Changyang clan didn't get sullied. At the same time, Jian Chen didn't want Changyang to be ridiculed for having such a cowardly brother. Slowly standing up from his chair, he grabbed the few books he had with him and returned them to the bookshelf. After the books were neatly shelved, Jian Chen began to walk out of the library. At that moment, the entire library watched Jian Chen's movements. Hey, Changyang Xiang Tian. As Jianchen reached the gates of the library, the female who was sitting next to him called out to him. Turning around in surprise, Jianchen looked at the beautiful girl with an even look. Yes? Hearing the even tone in his voice, the girl couldn't help but pout, but she didn't say anything and instead walked up to Jianchen and said, Changyang Xiang Tian, are you really going to accept his challenge at the arena? Of course. Jianchen nodded. You don't actually have to accept his challenge at all. The library banned any sort of loud noises, so those people have already violated the rules imposed by the academy. You could just go and report this to the headmaster, and he'll definitely penalize those two. In Kargath Academy, no one has ever dared to go against the headmaster's command, the girl said. Hearing these words, Jianchen started to look at the girl in a better light. With a light laugh, he said, they've already issued the challenge, so I have to accept. After saying that, he said no more, and left the library. As the girl watched Jianchen's figure disappear, her eyes quickly flashed. After some hesitation, she immediately ran to the table she had been sitting to return the thick book she had been reading back to the shelves, and ran out of the library, towards the martial arts arena. After the girl left, the entire library was silent for a moment. Suddenly, a loud voice rang out, there's another interesting scene to watch. A freshman at the 8th St. Force layer is battling against a person at the 9th St. Force layer. Anyone who doesn't watch it would be a fool. A male in his teens wearing the school uniform said as he directly ran out of the library after both these people had left. The few other students that had been reading in the library also returned the books in their hands to the shelves, and left the library one after another, running towards the martial arts arena. The school's martial arts arena was constructed in a corner of the sports field. Within it, there were 5 circular platforms, each one being approximately 20 meters in diameter. However, the insides of the martial arts arena was not that large, and could only comfortably fit 100 spectators. Otherwise, the freshman martial arts competition a few days ago wouldn't have been held at the temporarily modified stages on the sports field. When Jianshan arrived at the martial arts arena, he only saw Ka Diliang standing on one of the platforms with his arms crossed, with an arrogant expression on his face. Standing below the platform were Ka Di Chioli and a few other students wearing the academy uniforms, who were all absorbed in deep discussions. Seeing Jianshan arriving from the distance, Ka Diliang, who was standing on the platform, sneered at him and shouted, "And here I had thought that you were a coward and had not dared to come." Humph. Jianshan snorted in disdain, and directly jumped onto the platform. He stood on the platform with his arms crossed, and coldly replied, "Come at me. I'll allow you to attack me 10 times. During these 10 attacks, I will not retaliate." Hearing Jian Chen's arrogant words, the spectators below the platform began to cry out in shock, and began to talk amongst themselves in low voices. There were many elder students amid the spectators, and amongst them, quite a few did not have positive opinions about Jian Chen. They believed that during the freshman martial arts competition, the only reason why Jian Chen had defeated Ka Diliang was because Ka Diliang had been too careless. Ka Diliang's eye glinted with anger. Anyone could tell that Jian Chen's words meant that he did not see Ka Diliang as his equal. "Changyang Xiang Tian, you're even more savage than I had thought," Ka Diliang said forcefully. Jian Chen looked indifferently at Ka Diliang, and replied, "If you want to fight, then hurry up. I don't have the time to waste on you." Humph. Ka Diliang grunted, and sneered, "Why are you so rushed? Let's wait until everyone gathers here. I want everyone to witness the moment I defeat you." Because he had lost last time during the freshman martial arts competition, Ka Diliang had been brooding over it for a while, especially since Jian Chen had even kicked him in the butt. To him, this was an unforgettable humiliation. In Ka Diliang's opinion, he always felt that the only reason he had lost to Jian Chen was because he had been too careless. Thus, he wanted to take this chance to regain the face that he had previously lost, and aimed to ruthlessly humiliate Jian Chen in return. Gradually, the people surrounding the martial arts arena increased, and the population did not cease to increase either. From the distance, there were still many students heading towards the arena. This match had obviously been announced to the public by Ka Diliang. After only a short while had passed, the martial arts arena was packed with 200 or so people. Nearly everyone was excited to watch the lively scene. Amongst these people, Ka Di Liang's older brother, Ka Di Yun, also stood there, with a few people around his age standing next to him. Fourth brother, you can do it. Big brother is watching you. Suddenly, a familiar deep sound mixed amongst the other noises was clearly transmitted to the platform. Hearing this, Jianshen turned around, and saw his older brother Changyang who standing beneath the platform cheering for him. Jianshen smiled, and wordlessly nodded his head at Changyang who. At that moment, someone banged on the table and shouted, "Let's make bets, bets. Whoever wants to wager on the fight, come here. I bet on Ka Di Liang, 10 gold coins. I bet on Changyang Xiang Tian, 20 gold coins, 50 gold coins on Ka Di Liang." People gradually started to gamble on the outcome of the match between Jianshen and Ka Di Liang. Even those who usually attended class had came along with many nobles. Money was of no issue to them, so there were many people betting from 10 gold coins to 10 purple coins. Around 80% of the gamblers were betting on Ka Di Liang, and only 20% were betting on Jianshen. 10 purple coins on Changyang Xiang Tian. Changyang who slammed down the appropriate amount of coins onto the table. I'll bet on Changyang Xiang Tian as well, 10 purple coins. Behind Changyang Xiang Tian, a soft and gentle voice spoke. It was the girl from the library who sat next to Jianshen. She was obviously from a big clan. With every word she spoke, her tone was filled with a grandeur sound that sounded natural to her. After the girl had bet 10 purple coins on Changyang Xiang Tian, everyone else started to show expressions of surprise. Changyang who was the older brother of Changyang Xiang Tian, so his bet was easy to understand. However, this girl did not hesitate at all when she wagered her money. Despite their shock however, no student voiced out their questions. On the platform, Jianshen looked at Ka Di Liang with a strange expression and said, "We can start now, right?" Ka Di Liang held an expression filled with self-confidence, and he sneered, "Changyang Xiang Tian, you personally declared that you would allow me to attack 10 times. You'd better not go back on your words. A nobleman's word is his bond." "Just give me all you've got," Jianshen replied. He uses a proverb to say this. How arrogant. Although Ka Di Liang didn't quite understand the fancy proverb Jianshen had said, but he could roughly guess the meaning of it. Without another word, he dashed at Jianshen to start the fight. Since Jianshen had allowed him 10 moves, he wouldn't hold back and unleash his strongest moves. Ka Di Liang quickly rushed in front of Jianshen, and struck out with his fist that traveled through the air so fast, a whistling sound could be heard. Faced with the fist, Jianshen only took a single step back, and allowed the fist to stop short of him before it could make contact. Who? How close? Just a bit more and he would have been hit. This Changyang Xiang Tian can't be too powerful. As soon as the duel started, he was almost hit. If any of those punches connect, I'm afraid that he won't get off with just some minor damages, and the victor would already be clear. This Changyang Xiang Tian's luck is quite good, to have dodged it like that. Everyone under the arena had thought that Jianshen was merely lucky to have dodged Ka Di Liang's fist, and so only a few observers had realized the truth, causing them to start to look at Jianshen in a new light. Chapter 21. Saint Ka Di Yun. Seeing how close he was to hitting his target, Ka Di Liang felt a tiny amount of regret. However, he immediately went back into motion, and flung a kick at Jianshen. In a flash, 10 moves had passed without Jianshen retaliating, and every single move from Ka Di Liang had been easily dodged. But to everyone else that was watching, Jianshen had been narrowly dodging each move by the skin of his teeth, causing everyone watching, including Changyang who, to break out in cold sweat as they watched in anxiety. Ka Di Liang's attacks were fairly fast and furious, but none of the 10 moves he had lashed out with even touched Jianshen's clothes. Having not landed a single blow, Ka Di Liang was angry beyond belief. Finally lifting a fist to block Ka Di Liang's fist, Jianshen spoke, 10 moves have passed, it's my turn. Without waiting for a response, he aimed a kick at Ka Di Liang. The speed in which his leg was moving was extremely fast. There wasn't even enough time for Ka Diliang to dodge. By the time he tried to move his hand up to block, Jian Chen's leg had already smashed against Ka Diliang's chest. Dang! 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 The force of Jian Chen's leg caused Ka Diliang to stumble backwards. As he steadied himself, Ka Diliang gave Jian Chen a dumbstruck look. Although Jian Chen was only at the 8th Saint Force layer, Jian Chen's strength had far surpassed his expectations. It wasn't something Ka Diliang would be able to endure. In the last fight during the competition, Ka Diliang had never exchanged blows with Jian Chen, so he never understood the true extent of Jian Chen's strength. It was not until this fight that Ka Diliang realized that Jian Chen was stronger than he looked. In fact, based on the strength of the kick just now, Ka Diliang was starting to doubt that Jian Chen was only at the 8th Saint Force layer. Perhaps Jian Chen also wanted to end this battle quickly, because he didn't give Ka Diliang time to even gasp before he quickly slammed his fist into Ka Diliang's nose. Ka Diliang's face hardened as he stood back up. His entire body tried to stand against Jian Chen's fist before he tried to smash his fist against Jian Chen's head. Jian Chen let out a cold laugh before blocking the fist with his own hand. Grabbing onto Ka Diliang's shoulder with his other hand, he got into a horse stance, and grabbed onto him with his right arm. Grabbing tightly, he exerted some force and sent Ka Diliang flying away. In his previous life, Jian Chen had learned wrestling techniques from the Mongols, so he was fairly proficient at it. He had used it many times, and gained experience in it so much, that it was ingrained into his memory. Jian Chen learned many different skills other than just swordplay, and was fairly proficient at every single thing he put his mind towards. Ka Diliang's body was almost like a feather as he flew through the air, thanks to Jian Chen. He flew 4 to 5 meters into the air before finally falling back down to the arena. Phew! He saw Jian Chen to be weak, but somehow, Jian Chen had managed to accomplish such a feat with his delicate-looking figure. Likewise, the audience around the arena let out gasps of shock as they started to reevaluate their opinions about Jian Chen. Seeing the two fight it out like this made it so that no one would ever dare to underestimate Jian Chen in the future. The faces of Ka Di Yun and Ka Di Chiuli both gradually turned quite ugly. The situation was far beyond what they had expected it to be. Hung. Changyang Xian Tian, you actually are a slightly skilled, Ka Di Yun said in a low voice, while angrily gritting his teeth. Ka Diliang stood back up pathetically on the ring with a cloudy-looking face. He looked at Jian Chen's eyes with a gaze filled with poison. Ah! Ka Diliang roared, focusing all his power of the 9th level of Saint Force in the center of his two palms. He quickly rushed towards Jian Chen with both his arms pressing towards Jian Chen's chest, and attacked. Jian Chen sneered, and as he condensed all his Saint Force onto his palms as well, he suddenly threw his own hands towards Ka Diliang's, resulting in a collision between both pairs of hands. Pung! As the sound came echoing out, Jian Chen and Ka Diliang were stuck in a deadlock. Their fists had slammed so hard against each other, a mini shockwave pushed both of them backwards. Jian Chen didn't stop there, his legs began to blur as he skillfully maneuvered to counter the shock. Looking at the rapidly retreating Ka Diliang, Jian Chen immediately dashed forward and leapt up from the ground, both of his legs kicking out at Ka Diliang. Before Ka Diliang could regain his footing, he was unable to block the attack. As he was kicked in the stomach by Jian Chen, Ka Diliang was sent flying once more. PFF. Hitting the ground, Ka Diliang's face went white from the pain as he began to spit out some blood. He had started to take in heavy amounts of damage. Younger brother. Older brother. Ka Di Yun and Ka Di Chiuli ran up to Ka Diliang's side on the ground. Picking him up, they grimaced and looked at him with concern as they saw the small trickle of blood from the corner of Ka Diliang's mouth. Younger brother, are you okay? Ka Di Yun asked. His face was relatively unsightly to look at, although the situation was different from last time, since Ka Diliang had been careless during the first match with Jian Chen. However, this second time was different. This time Ka Diliang was fighting with Jian Chen using all of his strength, which was stronger than 80% of the other 9th Saint Force layer students. Older brother, how are you feeling? are you seriously hurt? Ka Di Chiuli asked with a voice full of concern. Ka Di Liang was helped to his feet by his two siblings. Lightly shaking his head, he said, eldest brother, third sister, I'll be fine. I've only suffered from minor injuries. But even as he said that, his two siblings could detect a small tinge of weakness in his voice. Looking at Ka Di Liang's pale face, Ka Dian grew angry. Raising his head to look at the elevated Jian Chen, he growled, third sister, you take care of second brother. I'll go teach that arrogant brat a lesson. Leaving his siblings, he walked up into the arena to confront him. Eldest brother, you shouldn't, eldest brother, you can't. Ka Di Liang and Ka Di Chiuli tried to block his path, but unfortunately, they didn't reach him in time. The two siblings let out a sigh. No matter if Ka Di Yun won or lost now, the Ka Di clan would lose some prestige within the academy. This was originally a fair battle, so if they had lost, then they wouldn't have felt any negative side effects other than losing some face. But now that Ka Di Yun was going to fight, the whole situation was different. If news about a freshman immediately being bullied by some seniors straight after entering the academy was spread throughout the entire academy, then the three siblings would be mocked and ridiculed by the whole academy. Jian Chen stared at Ka Di Yun as he leapt up onto the stage and sneered, are you here to avenge your brother? Angrily glaring at Jian Chen, he said, Changyang Xiang Tian, you really are strong. However, you've injured my brother, therefore, I won't let you leave this place unharmed. The people around the stage all creased their foreheads as they listened to him. Their opinions about Ka Di Yun had now changed. Ka Di Yun, what is the meaning of this? Do you plan to bully the Changyang clan until no one remains? A deep voice called out as another person walked onto the arena. Turning around, Jian Chen felt relieved to see it was his older brother, Changyang. Changyang stared at Ka Di Yun intensely. Ka Di Yun, if you want to fight, then you'll have to fight me first. Jian Chen felt a wave of warmth encompass his body as he listened to his brother back him up. Big brother, you should head back down, I can handle this myself. Changyang shook his head in response to him. No can do, fourth brother, it should be you that should head down. Ka Di Yun's strength has long since reached the peak of the Saint Force level. You are no match for him, so let your big brother help you. After hesitating a bit from these words, Jian Chen nodded, then big brother, please be careful. Saying this, Jian Chen walked off the arena. Ka Di Yun sneered in disdain as he watched Jian Chen exit the arena. Changyang, you're just asking for trouble, so don't blame me for anything that happens. You're saying this far too early. Whoever the winner is and whoever the loser is isn't certain yet. Changyang replied. He and Ka Di Yun had long since reached the peak of the 10th Saint Force layer, so if Ka Di Yun didn't condense his Saint Force into a Saint weapon, then their strengths would be equal. Ka Di Yun let loose a ridiculing expression as he looked at the disdain on Changyang's face. Lifting his right arm, a large golden-colored stream of energy started to focus onto his right arm and condensed into a great golden sword. The golden sword was quite large, and measured around 5 feet long and a single palm spread wide. Judging from the length of the handle, the sword was meant to be held with both hands. Looking at Ka Di Yun grab the sword with both hands, Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed together in concern. He had read up on saint weapons back in the Changyang mansion. He could easily see that this was Ka Di Yun's saint weapon, and that this was also the first saint weapon that Jian Chen had ever seen since he first arrived in this new world. He had long since understood that a saint weapon was the condensed version of one saint force, but seeing this with his own eyes, Jian Chen couldn't help but feel amazed. To think that the saint force could be condensed in such a way, it felt almost like a fantasy. This made Jian Chen feel extremely excited. The moment the golden two-hand sword appeared, everyone cried out in surprise and admiration. A saint weapon, he really did condense one. So he already broke through into the saint level. Ka Di Yun became a saint. Changyang will be in trouble now. The distance between the peak of the 10th layer to sainthood wasn't that far, but it was nonetheless very difficult to cross over. Within the Kargath Academy, the majority of the seniors had all reached the peak of the 10th Saint Force layer, but were unable to condense their Saint Force into Saint weapons. If one didn't have the talent that surpassed a regular person's, then it would be extremely difficult for her to make a breakthrough. Within the Tianyuan continent, it was not rare to see many practitioners to be stuck at the 10th layer until the end of their lives, without being able to become a saint. From this one could see that successfully becoming a saint was a truly difficult achievement. Also, once one broke through to becoming a saint, her strength would be increased by a large amount. A saint weapon wasn't one's only weapon. One could use her emotions to directly fuel her abilities in order to use attacks that far surpassed one's original strength. Looking at Ka Di Yun's golden sword, Jianghu's face became extremely unsightly. Now that Ka Di Yun possessed a saint weapon, his strength could overturn the heavens. A person at the peak of the 10th Saint Force layer definitely wouldn't be a match for him. Big Brother really did condense a saint weapon. Below the arena, Ka Di Chioli was pleasantly surprised, as she watched Ka Di Yun wave his saint weapon around. Ka Di Liang had an envious look on his face as he stared at the saint weapon, but he too was pleasantly surprised. Both siblings had not realized that their eldest sibling had reached the saint level until this moment. Holding the saint weapon, Ka Di Yun's confidence in himself was boosted to unprecedented levels. As Jianghu's face grew darker and darker, Ka Di Yun's face became even haughtier. The pleasure Ka Di Yun felt in his heart was indescribable. Ha ha ha, Jianghu, are you afraid now? If you kneel down and kowtow to the ground 3 times and call me your elder, then I'll spare you. If you don't, then, you'll know what the end result will be. Ka Di Yun laughed crazily, his tone savage. Jianghu's face ashened as he listened to Ka Di Yun's demands. Snarling, he answered, "Dream on, Ka Di Yun. Even if you're a saint now, I, Jianghu, will never be afraid of you." Ka Di Yun looked at Jianghu arrogantly, and casually said, "Jianghu, what will you use to fight me with then?" Jianghu angrily glared at Ka Di Yun, fury blazing in his eyes. "Jianghu, your sword." At that moment, a sword came flying out from the audience below the arena. Jianghu grabbed the iron sword while settling into a stance. The sword was not light at all, and was of a fairly long size. The silver-white sword sparkled in the light in all 4 directions, and aside from the color, there were few differences between Ka Di Yun's sword and Jianghu's sword. Chapter 23, Becoming Popular because of skill. The moment that Ka Di Yun felt pain, he swung out with his other hand at Jian Chen's arms, while aiming his left leg at Jian Chen's groin. Even though one of his arms was useless, Ka Di Yun was still able to launch a counterattack. Even with this unsightly scene, Ka Di Yun had some experience with battles and tried to escape this situation. Seeing a flurry of arms and legs flashing before his eyes, Jian Chen knew that he wouldn't be able to directly take the attacks head-on. He helplessly let go of Ka Di Yun's arm, and used the profound steps to retreat. He managed to dodge Ka Di Yun's attack and circled around to his back, before using his Saint Force to amplify his attack on Ka Di Yun's back. Feeling the strong wind behind his back, Ka Di Yun didn't hesitate for a second and evaded Jian Chen by diving to the side. However, even as he dodged, Ka Di Yun was amazed. No matter where he moved, he would always feel a wind blowing on his back. He wasn't able to keep up with Jian Chen's movements. Pang! Ka Di Yun was completely unable to keep up with Jian Chen, who smashed both of his hands into Ka Di Yun's back, creating a cracking sound as he was hit by a violent attack. This caused Ka Di Yun to stagger 2 steps forward, but since he was a strong saint, he immediately steadied himself. However, his face had already paled, as he realized that Jian Chen had hit the same place twice with his fists. Jian Chen's strength could already be measured at the peak of the 9th layer, and despite Ka Di Yun being stronger than him in rank, he was the one being injured more. At that moment, he could only feel a surge of qi and blood course through his body, his organs screaming in pain. As Ka Di Yun steadied himself, Jian Chen had already arrived at his backside another time, and struck at his back with his right hand once more. Although the fist traveled at a speed that made it look like it was as light as a feather, the effect was anything but light. Anyone that had faced off against Jian Chen before would agree that Jian Chen's strength was more extraordinary than it looked. Ka Di Yun turned around abruptly, his eyes were indignant with anger. For a strong person like him to suffer this much from someone who was by all rights weaker than him, his simple plan to humiliate Jiangchen was no longer as simple as he thought. Ha! Ka Diyun snarled in anger, as his hands started to glow golden with his Saint Force. The huge concentration of Saint Force condensed into his hand as he faced Jiangchen, aiming it towards Jiangchen's chest. Seeing Jiangchen attack with a seemingly light fist, Ka Diyun prepared to take it head-on in order to get close to Jiangchen for his own attack. The situation turned into a critical point of the match, as both the fighters' attacks struck each other. Jiangchen's seemingly light and weak fist silently struck against Ka Diyun's chest. Immediately, Ka Diyun's own fist let out a muffled sound as it struck against Jiangchen's body, blowing apart a hole in the academy uniform, and revealing a tender white skin that would be the target of envy by many of the girls. But in the blink of an eye, the skin underneath became a pile of bruises after receiving Ka Diyun's blow. Dang! 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 After receiving a blow from Ka Diyun, Jiangchen's face contorted in pain, and the color started to drain away from his face. And with the blow being enforced by such a huge amount of strength, his legs weren't enough to prevent him from sliding back, until he was a few inches away from the edge of the arena. At this moment, other than his paling face, Jiangchen did not seem to have any other problems, despite Ka Diyun using his Saint Force to accentuate his attack. Although Jiangchen was only at the 8th layer, because he had been using Azulite Sword Law to constantly cultivate his body since he was young, he had strengthened every single organ and part of his body to the utmost degree. So while on the outside, it seemed that Jiangchen's physical body was quite weak, his actual ability to resist and take damage would leave anyone flabbergasted. Even though Ka Diyun was a saint, without using his saint weapon, his regular attacks would not be able to seriously wound Jiangchen. At the most, Jiangchen would sport some small bruises. On the other hand, while Ka Diyun was standing at the same place, his face had scrunched up in major pain as his body began to visibly tremble from the pain he was feeling. Before, Jiangchen's fist that seemed to be as light as a feather, impacted against his stomach and caused a peculiar feeling to be transferred over into him. The power forcibly entered his body and suddenly went berserk as it exploded within him, causing his internal body to go crazy from the pain. Ka Diyun's face became incomparably dark, as he used all the Saint Force within his body began to combat the power that was rebelling inside. Since his Saint Force was stronger than Jiangchen's, the foreign power within him was cleared away quickly, but the damage was done. At this point, Ka Diyun was suffering from internal damages as well. The damages weren't very serious, but it would definitely impact his performance in the battle for the worse if it dragged on. Ka Diyun glared at the calm Jiangchen in front of him with a shocked expression. He hadn't ever imagined that he would be put in such a difficult spot as a saint by someone who was lower ranked than him. Although he wasn't using his saint weapon, his strength was still stronger than those at the peak of the 10th layer, let alone the 8th layer Jiangchen. At that moment, Ka Diyun finally realized how hard it was to deal with Jiangchen, but it was too late to stop. Over the past few confrontations, he understood that without using the saint weapon, he would have a difficult time beating Jiangchen and might even lose to him. With the saint weapon he would definitely win against him, but that wouldn't be a bright situation. Besides, he had also clearly stated that he wouldn't use a saint weapon against Jiangchen. If he went back on his word now, then even if he won, his reputation would plummet to the bottom. After all, there were plenty of people watching the match, along with some seniors. Not only that, but he was Ka Diyun, Jessen Kingdom's elite elder son of the Ka Di clan. He couldn't lose face now. Ka Diyun was starting to reflect on his actions now, but then Jiangchen decided to charge at him with both his arms outstretched. Rapidly approaching, Jiangchen was using a weird technique to cause his moves to become unpredictable and made him look like a bolt of lightning. In Ka Diyun's eyes, Jiangchen had become an after-image. Ka Diyun narrowly blocked Jiangchen's strike. His right arm was dislocated, and he hadn't had enough time to pop it back into place, so he could only use his left hand to block against Jiangchen's attacks. Because of this, in face of Jiangchen's Saint Force, Ka Diyun fell from his invincible position, and began to fight back earnestly now. He no longer belittled Jiangchen, and started to view him as an opponent of the same level. The two people continued to fight at a fast-paced speed. The battlefield became fierce. Jiangchen didn't dare to hold back since Ka Diyun's strength was much stronger than his own. With both of them in a deadlock, the two could only defend against each other. Jiangchen's attacks were getting stronger and stronger, while Ka Diyun was finding it harder and harder to resist. Gradually in front of Ka Diyun's eyes, all he could see were the palms of Jiangchen's hands. His eyes were getting too tired to differentiate between the after images of Jiangchen, and he could only rely on his listening abilities to tell when and where Jiangchen would attack. Finally, Ka Diyun became careless, and Jiangchen struck out at his left shoulder with a powerful strike. Ka Diyun couldn't help but lag behind, as Jiangchen began to bombard him with a plethora of attacks. It was almost as if Ka Diyun was in a very violent storm where he was battered from every angle. Pung! 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 Jiangchen repeatedly hit Ka Diyun on the shoulder with ferocious attacks, and even Ka Diyun's strong saint power could not bear the attacks. He constantly retreated. And a trace of blood trickled out of Ka Diyun's mouth. Seeing that Ka Diyun was already driven to the edge of the arena, Jiangchen's eyes fiercely flashed. Growling, Jiangchen gathered the saint force into his hand and struck Ka Diyun in the chest another time. This fist was a lot stronger than the last, and the moment the fist connected, Ka Diyun fell from the arena down onto the ground below. Jiangchen stood on the arena while breathing heavily. Since he was constantly using his entire strength, he had exhausted his supply of saint force, to the point where it had almost none left within his body. If Ka Diyun did not accept defeat here and now, then Jiangchen would not be able to maintain his odds of winning for long. The arena became quiet, as everyone stared at the lone figure standing on top of the arena. At this moment, everyone showed incomprehensible expressions. This had already exceeded anyone's wildest guess, and no one had thought that Jiangchen would win against a saint. Most importantly, he had defeated a saint while coming out almost unharmed. Even though the saint didn't use a saint weapon, this outcome was no less surprising nor predictable. At this moment, the arena was completely silent, so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. There were over 200 people that were watching, but not a single person dared to make a sound. Big brother, a voice finally broke the spell of silence over the arena as the Ka Di siblings sped over to where Ka Diyun lay on the floor. As if awakened, everyone started to burst into noise, as if the seal of a pot had been broken. All around the arena, people were chattering away noisily with excitement and shock. Heavens, I'm not dreaming, an 8th layer student managed to beat a saint. This is an unprecedented event in the academy history. Is that Changyang Xiang Tian really at the 8th layer? Even a person at the peak of the 10th layer wouldn't necessarily be able to beat a saint who wasn't using his saint weapon. Changyang Xiang Tian's strength can't possibly be only at the 8th saint force layer. Who knows, he might have already condensed a saint weapon. Otherwise, how else would he be able to beat a student like Senior Ka Diyun, a saint? Perhaps Changyang Xiang Tian used some sort of despicable method to win. Jiangchen didn't bother to answer any of the comments and jumped down to where his older brother Changyang was. Looking at his brother's expression of extreme shock, Jiangchen laughed. Big brother, I didn't disappoint you. I've won. Changyang became emotional after hearing that, and hugged Jiangchen with both arms. Fourth brother, you're seriously amazing. You managed to beat Ka Diyun, a saint. Your big brother truly admires you, he said as he wrapped Jiangchen in a huge bear hug. Jiangchen let loose a happy smile from the affection, before he gradually disentangled himself from his brother's arms. Big brother, there's too many people here to talk. Let's leave this place first. Chapter 24. Skill. Changyang unconsciously turned around to look at the crowd before nodding his head. All right, fourth brother, let's go to your room first. You definitely have to tell me how you beat Ka Diyun, and then later tonight, I'll grab a few friends to come and celebrate. Jiangchen smiled happily at his brother. Big brother, I can teach you how I beat Ka Diyun, but let's forget about the celebration. Fine, I'll listen to you. Come on, fourth brother, let's go back to your dorm. It's far too noisy here. Changyang started to pull his younger brother back towards the direction of the dorms. Changyang Xiang Tian. Before Jiangchen could take a step, a gentle and exquisite voice called out to him. Hearing the familiar voice, Jiangchen blanked out for a moment before turning around. Looking at the speaker, he recognized the figure of the running girl, particularly the pretty girl who had sat next to him in the library earlier. Yes? Jiangchen questioned, as he indifferently looked at the young girl, who was so beautiful that it would be easy to cause a city to fight over her. The girl's voice was like a gentle stream of water as she laughed joyously. Slowly extending her arm out to reveal a purse, she happily said, "Changyang Xiang Tian, you managed to win me 100 purple coins, I really have to thank you." Her voice was extraordinarily soft, and also very pleasant to listen to. It was almost as if she was a skylark singing on a peaceful day. Hearing this, Changyang, who appeared to have suddenly realized something. He slapped his forehead in disbelief. I just remembered. I put down 100 purple coins. That was my entire savings and I didn't get it back. Fourth brother, you go on without me, your big brother has to get his money back. And with that, Changyang, who vanished like the wind, back to where the crowd of gamblers were. Looking at Changyang, who rushed back for his money, Jiangchen couldn't help but laugh. At that moment, the girl slowly walked up to Jiangchen, studying his handsome features with her inquisitive eyes. "Hello. Changyang Xiang Tian, my name is Yu. May I ask you a question?" Jiangchen laughed and replied, "Miss Yu, if you have a question, you should go on ahead and ask, but I can't guarantee an answer." "No worries." Yu gently laughed before asking, "Changyang Xiang Tian, is your strength really only of the 8th Saint Force layer?" Jiangchen hesitated for a moment before he nodded his head. "That's right, at the moment, I am currently in the 8th Saint Force layer, but I have a feeling I'll be making a breakthrough into the 9th layer soon." Yu was surprised after hearing his answer. With an astounded look, she exclaimed, "Changyang Xiang Tian, you mean you really haven't reached the saint level?" Her voice carried some doubt. Clearly, she didn't believe him entirely. Noticing the disbelief in her voice, Jiangchen furrowed his brows and spoke with some annoyance. "Miss Yu, I seem to have answered your question." Even though she was a beautiful girl that could cause countless cities to fight for her, to Jiangchen, she was no different than the average girl. Yu immediately waved her hands in an apologetic motion as she laughed. "I'm sorry, Changyang Xiang Tian, I'm just far too amazed. I hope you didn't take offense to what I said." Her voice trailed off as Changyang, who came running back with a joyful face and a fat coin bag. When he arrived by Jianchen's side, he was tossing the purse up and down his hand as he snickered, "Fourth brother, your big brother is very wise. In less than an hour, I've won 100 purple coins." 100 purple coins was by no means a small number to a commoner, and for those who only ate a simple amount of food in their lives, 100 purple coins could feed a family of 3 for the rest of their lives. Staring at the coin purse in his brother's hands, Jiangchen started to smile and said, "Miss Yu, if you have no other questions, then I'll be leaving first." Yu smiled back at him, "That's fine, I won't hold you up any longer. I haven't finished reading my book either, so I'll be returning to the library. Changyang Xiang Tian, I'll see you later." Soon after, Jiangchen brought his older brother back to his dorm and closed the door as they both walked in. Immediately, Changyang, who impatiently asked, "Fourth brother, you've got to tell me what you did to beat Ka Diyun, and how strong you really are. It couldn't only be at the 8th Saint Force layer, you have to be a saint." As he spoke, Changyang, whose face revealed an impatient, excited face as he waited for an answer. Jiangchen gently shook his head, "I'm not. Big brother, my actual strength should be not too far away from the 9th Saint Force layer. As for reaching the saint level, I believe I'm still quite far away from it." Changyang, who looked at him with doubt, "Fourth brother, if you say you haven't reached the level of a saint, then how did you beat Ka Diyun?" Laughing, Jiangchen replied, How did I beat Ka Diyun? Big brother, did you not see the match clearly?" Changyang, whose head drooped down in embarrassment as he blushed, "That is, fourth brother, actually I wasn't able to see the match all that clearly. Could you please tell your older brother?" Although Changyang, who had seen the match from start to finish, there were some things that could not be comprehended by eyesight alone. For example, Changyang, who had not been able to comprehend what happened when Jiangchen struck at Ka Diyun with a punch that seemed to be as light as a feather, but still managed to significantly damage. Jianshan sat on his bed, calmly looked at Jianghu, and said, "Big brother, the only reason a student of the 8th layer like me was able to beat a saint like Ka Diyun was because I relied on a technique to win." A technique? Jianghu was still skeptical. He was no stranger when it came to techniques and skill, because in the academy, many of the teachers would often talk about their knowledge of their personal techniques. In a fight against equally matched experts, one would need to use extremely strong techniques in order to win, but such techniques weren't so easy to train in. Even if they did learn the techniques, only those with battle experience would be able to learn and perfect a technique to the point of being able to incorporate it into their fighting styles. What Jianghu really confused was that, not only was Jianshan younger than him, but he has also only been at the academy for a few days now. Jianghu couldn't help but be shocked when he saw that Jianshan had mastered such a technique. "Fourth brother, where did you learn a technique like that?" Jianghu asked curiously. Jianshan shook his head sadly. "Big brother, I can't tell you that." Upon hearing that, Jianghu had a look of sorrow on his face. The next thing Jianshan had said, though, brought his spirits back up. "Big brother, if you are willing to learn a martial technique, I can teach you." "For real? That's great. Fourth brother, when can you get started on teaching me?" "How about now?" He was anxious to get started, and wanted to learn this amazing technique right away. Once he learned the technique, then it was even possible for him to challenge saints who had condensed their saint weapons with his current power. Jianshan laughed. "Big brother, it would be better to start tomorrow. I'll be waiting for you in the eastern grotto outside the academy tomorrow morning." "All right, fourth brother, it's a deal. I'll be at the grotto tomorrow morning," Jianghu promised. Although many of the academy teachers could help instruct one on learning a martial technique, he knew in his heart that fighting techniques were best taught by the previous generation in a clan. Techniques taught by the professors here would not be strong enough to overwhelm any of his opponents. Afterwards, the two brothers chatted for a while, until Jianghu finally left. Because Jianshan had used up most of his saint force to fight against Ka Diyun, he was exhausted and slightly injured. Because of that, he decided to use the Class 3 Monster Core in order to recover his health. Little did he know that, the whole academy was already in an uproar about how Jianshan had beaten Ka Diyun. There wasn't anyone in the academy who hadn't heard about it, and it shocked both students and teachers alike. Everyone thought this to be inconceivable, and an event of this scale was practically unprecedented in the entire history of the Kargath Academy. No one had ever heard of a saint who had been strong enough to easily beat a person at the peak of the 10th layer be beaten by someone only at the 8th layer. Even if a saint did not use a saint weapon, she could still easily defeat someone of the 9th layer, let alone a freshman who was only at the 8th layer. The news of the fight between Jianshan and Ka Diyun soon reached the ears of the headmaster. Within the middle of the central tower in Kargath Academy, the headmaster pondered about the situation while standing next to the open window. As his eyebrows knit together, he asked, "Bai En, is what you say true? Changyang Xiang Tian actually beat the Saint Ka Diyun while he was only at the 8th Saint Force layer?" Even the headmaster couldn't believe it the first time, and his eyes twinkled in curiosity. The vice headmaster, Bai En, stood respectfully behind the headmaster. In response to the headmaster's words, Bai En replied, "Headmaster, I've heard all of the students talk about it, but I'm not too sure of the exact details. But right now, this event has set the academy upside down. Practically every teacher knows that Changyang Xiang Tian has beaten the higher-ranked Ka Diyun. Rumors have it though, that Ka Diyun didn't use his saint weapon, and fought bare-handed against Jianshan." The headmaster stroked his long white beard, in deep thought. Since the rumors spread this wide, it would appear that it is true. It seems that Changbai has brought quite the complicated youngster. For a saint to be beaten by an 8th later student, how inconceivable. Even if the saint had recently broken through and didn't use his weapon, his strength should still be higher than one at the 10th layer. In all my years at Kargath Academy, I have never seen such a match where someone with a lower level won. Headmaster, what should we do about this situation? Sooner or later, the seniors of the school will search for the 8th layer student who beat a saint, and become an inconvenience for Changyang Xiang Tian, said Bai En with a respectful tone. The amount of respect Bai En had for headmaster couldn't be measured, as it could even be considered as worship. The headmaster turned towards Bai En and casually waved his hand. Forget it, let them handle it by themselves. As long as they don't make a big deal out of it, we won't interfere. Besides, this should be a test for them. If they can't take everything thrown at them, then they won't mature into fine warriors. Chapter 25. Instructing Big Brother in a blink of an eye. 3 days had passed since the fight between Ka Di-yun and Jian Shen had taken place. Pretty much everyone in Kargath Academy knew about Changyang Xiang Tian now. You couldn't even walk a few steps without hearing his name. In the past 3 days, Jian Shen had spent every morning teaching his big brother martial techniques in the grottos. Other than that, he spent the rest of his time cultivating. The Class 3 Monster Core had drastically improved his cultivation rate. He wanted to hurry up and reach the 10th layer so that he could rush straight into the Saint level. Jian Shen had been very curious on how condensing a Saint weapon worked, but according to book explanations, once the Saint weapon is condensed, it replaced one's Saint force. From that moment on, the Saint weapon would be the origin for one's power. While it remains in the body, it releases Saint force, and when one summons it, the Saint weapon becomes one's strongest weapon. With it, one's attack would be multiplied. A Saint weapon was one's energy. If it were to break, then that person would lose all of their cultivation progress as well as receiving a fatal injury. If the break was fatal enough, then the practitioner would die. However, a Saint weapon was extremely strong. It wouldn't break unless the opposing side was vastly stronger than them. The next morning, Jian Shen opened his eyes, signifying the completion of last night's cultivation. After 3 entire days of cultivation, the Saint force inside Jian Shen had been strengthened, and he estimated that he was long since past the 9th layer. He would have to test his Saint force to find out whether or not he became a 10th layer practitioner or a saint. Getting off his bed, Jian Shen got dressed quickly before heading out of his dorm. The sky was still dark, and majority of the students were still cultivating or sleeping. The sports field was relatively peaceful since there were no people in sight. Only in remote corners did Jian Shen see a few other early risers practicing. Passing the field, Jian Shen immediately headed towards the grotto. These past few days, Jian Shen was to spend some time every morning to teach his older brother some knowledge about the aspects of fighting. After all, in his previous world, Jian Shen was a wanderer and an expert for many years, so he had participated in countless battles. The amount of battle experience far surpassed that of the Kargath Academy teachers. If actually compared, Jian Shen already had the qualifications to go teach the Kargath Academy teachers. When Jian Shen arrived at the grotto, he discovered that his older brother Changyang, who was already waiting there, and was currently sitting on a tree stump. He had an aimless expression, as he randomly swept his gaze around his surroundings in boredom. As soon as Jian Shen appeared, he immediately stood up in excitement, and jumped up from the tree stump. He happily said, "Fourth brother, you've finally arrived." Jian Shen smiled, "Big brother, why did you arrive so early?" "Hee, it's habit, just a habit." "Fourth brother, let's start now. I spent the whole day yesterday trying to make heads or tails of the utilization of power you mentioned yesterday morning, but I was still unable to understand it. Can you re-explain it in detail to your big brother, one more time?" Changyang Hu asked in a slightly embarrassed tone. "Of course I can." Jian Shen smiled, and replied, "Big brother, I'll tell you about that tomorrow morning. Today, I'll personally demonstrate it to you." Saying this, Jian Shen picked up a skinny stick next to his feet. "Big brother, watch closely." Saying this, Jian Shen took the branch and lightly waved it in the direction of a small tree, about the thickness of his wrist. When the branch approached the small tree, the skinny branch directly left his hand and silently pierced through the small tree, as if there were no obstacles at all. It seemed almost as if the small tree was originally only a mirage. As he watched this strange scene, Changyang Hu started to have major doubts. At that moment, a rustling sound was heard, as the small tree started to split in the middle, the top half crashing down. Changyang Hu opened his eyes wide and immediately ran towards the tree only to see the strangely smooth incision on it. It was almost as if a sharp sword had chopped the tree down. It was truly unimaginable, since this fine cut done by a light slash of a flimsy tree branch had been enough to chop through the small tree. Immediately, Jianghu's eyes switched over to the small tree branch in Jian Chen's hand. He ran on over and took it into his hands to look over, but not matter how much he looked at it, it seemed to be an average tree branch. As he brandished it softly, the tree branch merely swayed with his hand. Seeing this, Jianghu's doubt grew even more. He really did not understand how such a plain-looking tree branch could cut down a tree trunk the size of his wrist. He exerting some strength into his fingers, and the tree branch in his hand broke in half. "Fourth brother, how in the world did you do this? How can such a weak little tree branch cut down a small tree?" Jianghu asked. The doubt on his face could be clearly seen. Jian Chen laughed. "Big brother, this only requires Saint force to accomplish it. Don't say it's because of the tree branch. Even if it's a needle or a sewing thread, they both can cut through a tree branch with ease. Of course, my current strength isn't strong enough to do that." "What, a sewing needle and string can cut through a tree? Fourth brother, do you have a fever or something? This can't be possible." Jianghu cried out in shock. He couldn't believe what Jian Chen had said at all, since he had never heard of such a thing since he was born. To him, this was an impossible feat. Jian Chen smiled from the start to finish of Jianghu's outburst. He had not expected him to react differently. But Jian Chen didn't bother to explain. When the day came where Jianghu's strength was strong enough, he would understand. Jian Chen picked up another tree branch from the ground and said, "Big brother, you're still wondering how I could use a tree branch to cut through a tree, right? Take another look, I'll demonstrate one more time." Jianghu went silent as he became entirely focused on the tree branch in Jian Chen's hand. He didn't dare to get distracted now, just in case he missed out on some details. Waving the tree branch in his hands, Jian Chen's eyes flashed once before the tree branch suddenly distorted in his hands, causing the bent parts of the tree branch to slowly straighten. In the way it had been warped, it was almost as if it had a life of its own, since it was moving in the same manner as a snake would. It slowly started to move around in midair. Those who saw the sight would only be able to describe it as weird. Jianghu's eyes grew wide from this strange display as he couldn't believe what he was seeing. With his eyes so wide, he looked as if he'd seen a ghost. He couldn't believe it at all. It was only a tree branch, and yet it had unexpectedly started to move around by itself. Jian Chen's eyes started to emit an amazing light as he cried, "Big brother, please watch carefully." Jian Chen grabbed onto the perfectly straight tree branch and walked forward with it towards another small tree nearby. His movements weren't fast at all. In actuality, they were very slow. Inching towards the tree, the moment his tree branch touched against the tree, it was as if the tree branch was being absorbed into the tree. Slowly, the tree branch went deeper and deeper into the tree trunk before it finally skewered itself through it. This act stunned Jianghu into silence as he focused onto the impaled tree trunk. His mouth dropped open so much that an egg could fit inside. His eyes were filled with an expression of disbelief. "Fourth brother, how did you do that?" Jianghu shivered in awe. Even his heart was violently pulsing as his eyes were still planted on the tree. With a faint smile, Jian Chen answered, "Big brother, it's actually not that hard to do this. As long as you harmonize your saint force with the tree branch, then even though it's just a normal tree branch, it will turn into a sharp weapon. If one's strength is strong enough, then the tree branch can cut as easily as an iron sword." To harmonize the saint force and the tree branch, Jianghu's eyebrows furrowed in concentration as he muttered. Immediately, he grabbed a tree branch on the floor and, following Jian Chen's instructions, he began to infuse the tree branch slowly with his saint force. Pung! At the very moment when his saint force made contact with the tree branch violently exploded and sent pieces of it flying throughout the air. "Big brother, your saint force is excessively fierce, so the frail tree branch wasn't able to bear it. Also, you're not proficient enough to control your saint force to a fine level yet. Remember, when you harmonize the saint force into the tree branch, you must make sure to transform the saint force into a soft type of energy, not a violent one." Jianghu instructed. Hearing that, Jianghu became puzzled. Fourth brother, how does one make their saint force become a soft type of energy? Turning the saint force into a soft type of energy is merely just a different way of using it, that's all. Trying to explain this mystery anymore would be useless since only you can understand yourself. Big brother, starting from today, whenever you have spare time, try to harmonize the tree branch with your saint force. This way, it'll also strengthen your saint force. In the future, if you can reach the level I showed you today, it'll bring you many good benefits when you cultivate. Jianghu explained, almost as if he was a teacher instructing his students. However, Jianghu knew that if Jianghu wanted to accomplish what he had just demonstrated, trying to make a frail tree branch strong enough to pierce through a small tree in such a small time, it would definitely not be accomplished in such a short amount of time. This required a high mastery of one's saint force, and without a sufficient amount of practice, Jianghu would definitely not be able to harmonize the two together. Having a wooden tree branch harden into a sharp weapon like an iron sword was not simple at all. Infusing an iron sword with saint force would be easier, for example, but while an iron sword could support a larger amount of saint force, a tree branch could not, and required a gentle control. Jianghu nodded, and after some contemplation, once again picked up the branch to try again. However, without exception, every single one of his attempts resulted in failure. Not a single time did he succeed. He was completely unable to merge the spirit force into the tree branch. Every time his inner spirit force approached the tree branch, the branch would explode, unable to bear his overly fierce and intense spirit force. Jianghu stood on a side and watched Jianghu practice, and at the same time, he continued to instruct his brother. They continued all the way until the sun had risen above them. Only then did Jianghu leave the grotto, leaving Jianghu alone as he continued to try without stopping. Next to him, the ground already had a huge pile of broken tree branches. Chapter 27, Incoming Trouble. 1. Immediately, the spared student ran over to the fallen two students. Concerned, he asked the pale youth that Jianghu had kicked twice, "Luo Yun, are you all right?" The student named Luo Yun nodded his head and spoke with a weak voice, "I'll be fine after a few days of cultivation." Turning around, he asked the other injured student and whispered, "Carl, you can find information around the academy faster than us. Find out what that brat's name is, then have Master Ching sort him out." Hearing his friend, Carl thought for a second before responding, "There's no need to, I think I already know who he is." The other two students' face lit up as Luo Yun said, "That's great then, Carl, who is he?" In this year's annual freshman competition, there was an unusually strong competitor, the very same one that beat the saint, Ka Di Yun, while being an 8th Saint Force layer practitioner. "I think he's that person." Carl's face grew dark as he said it. As the two students heard Carl, their faces immediately changed. Looking at each other, Luo Yun said, "Could he really be that Changyang Xiang Tian?" Carl nodded his head, "It's very possible. Within the newest group of freshmen, only Changyang Xiang Tian could beat me. If he really is Changyang Xiang Tian, then we can't even be considered his opponents on any reasonable level if he can really beat that saint, Ka Di Yun. Even if he didn't use his saint weapon, that's still enough proof of Changyang Xiang Tian's strength. Even if he really is Changyang Xiang Tian, he still dared to cross my path. I definitely won't let him have a peaceful time at this academy," spoke the first person who had been attacked by Jianghu. Luo Yun's white face started to sneer as he growled, "That's good, our Luo clan's young master had been asking around for news about Changyang Xiang Tian recently. If he hears about this, the young master will be happy. It's a pity that we didn't know where he was for the past few days. After searching for him, who knew that he would coincidentally just show up here and now? Luo Yun, you go find the young master of your Luo clan, Chen Feng, and I will call out Master Cheng." "I doubt that Changyang Xiang Tian would be a match for Master Cheng." Carl growled. "Fine, we'll all do what we need to, but I suggest that we leave one person behind to continue observing Changyang Xiang Tian. Since the academy is so large, if Changyang Xiang Tian decides to hide, we'd never be able to find him," Luo Yun proposed. Carl nodded his head before turning to his friend behind him, "Chen Feng, you stay here and observe him. I'll go find Master Cheng. No problem. Chen Feng promised without hesitation. After the tasks had been split up, Chen Feng left to trail Jian Chen, while the two other students picked up the still unconscious one and left to do their own task. Within the library, Jian Chen sat down at a nearby table with 2 books and began to eagerly read. Because the day was still early, the library was very empty and quiet. Aside from Jian Chen, there was only a middle-aged female janitor nearby bustling around. The woman was around 40 years old with an average appearance. Since she had no talent in cultivation, she was only at the 6th St. Force layer, even though she was already 40. Even the weakest student in Kargath Academy was stronger than her. The woman tilted her head up to look at the studying Jian Chen, and although she didn't know his name, Jian Chen had left a deep impression on her. Aside from the past 3 days, Jian Chen had always been the first student to enter the library, and was always studying for the whole day. There were even some days where he didn't eat lunch to continue reading. The janitor lady had already been serving the academy for many years, but Jian Chen had been the very first student she had ever seen that was so hardworking. What a hardworking child. She had muttered to herself as she set out to do her tasks. In a large room, a youth around 20 years old stood in the middle of the room with his eyes closed. His body was positioned in a very strange way, and like a log, he just stood there without moving a single inch. Dong dong dong. At that moment, a muffled knock was heard from the other side. At the same time, the youth with the closed eyes began to slowly open them, and maintaining his strange posture, he stared at the door. Who is it? He called out. My lord, it's me, Luo Yun. Came the voice from outside. Enter. He stated. The door opened, allowing the 20-year-old man to see one of the 4 students that was beaten up by Jian Chen, Luo Yun. Luo Yun looked at the weirdly positioned youth without batting an eye, as if this wasn't a strange occurrence. That was because this weird position was actually the Luo clan's method of cultivation. In the Tianyuan continent, there weren't many training manuals recorded. Among the few of them were cultivation meditation, and even less people had mastered a new position to cultivate in. The Luo clan was definitely the latter and would put their bodies into a position unique to them in order to maximize their cultivation. Luo Yun walked over to the other youth and stooped over in respect. Master, for the past few days you've been searching for the whereabouts for Changyang Xiang Tian. I've just recently found and met him. Although Luo Yun had a great standing within his clan, in front of this youth, even he would not dare to be arrogant. That was because this youth was Luo Jian, the first son of the clan leader of the Luo clan. Along with the loving affection from the clan leader, he was deemed to be the future successor of the Luo clan, and so Luo Yun had wanted to curry favor with him. You found Changyang Xiang Tian. Upon hearing that, Luo Jian's eyes brightened up. Noticing Luo Yun's pale face, Luo Jian's eyes trailed down Luo Yun's shirt to see the single footprint on his chest. With a haughty voice, Luo Jian said, seeing you in such a sorry state, it would appear that this Changyang Xiang Tian forced you to suffer quite a bit. Luo Yun's face grew angry as he spoke. What the Lord says is correct. I just recently saw Changyang Xiang Tian and politely asked him to come visit my lord. But that Changyang Xiang Tian was completely outrageous and arrogant beyond belief. Not only that, but he is extremely violent, and most importantly, he did not care for you at all. He said that the Lord is. Luo Yun started to trail off from hesitation. Luo Jian scowled. Don't just stand there and stutter. What did Changyang Xiang Tian say about me? Luo Yun's eyes flashed with an indignant color as he hesitated for one last time. With a spurt of courage, he cried, Changyang Xiang Tian said that the master wasn't worth a fart, and throwing a shoe at him would not be worth the effort. What? Luo Jian's face grew just as angry as his emotions. Although the Luo clan was not extremely influential within the Tianyuan continent, within the Jessan kingdom, they were one of the most prestigious clans with a 200-year-old history. In the Jessan kingdom, the amount of clans that could beat them in power could be counted on one's hands. When it came to the successor of the Luo clan, it can be said that Luo Jian was a noble of extremely high standards, that even the crown prince and princess of the kingdom could be considered to be on the same footing as he was. He didn't think that within the Kargath Academy there would be an unknown freshman that would dare to be so egotistical. In his entire life, he had never seen someone so arrogant towards him. Luo Jian's stare grew cold towards Luo Yun. He really said this? The amount of anger was hardly being concealed by Luo Jian's tone. Seeing Luo Jian's reaction, Luo Yun was secretly delighted. However, he quickly regained himself and said, "Yes, my lord, what Luo Yun says is true. I wouldn't dare lie to you, this Changyang Xiang Tian is truly too arrogant. He never saw you as anyone worthwhile, and even dared to spout out arrogant words. If we do not teach him a lesson, then I fear that the Lord will lose face and be the target of ridicule within the academy." The more Luo Yun spoke, the angrier Luo Jian became. Standing to his feet, he growled, "Where is Changyang Xiang Tian? I want you to bring me to him, and if he truly doesn't see me as someone worthwhile, then I shall see how strong he is." "Yes, of course. Please follow me, my lord." Luo Yun exited the room and brought the angry Luo Jian out of the room with him towards the library. At the same time, within one of the rooms in Kargath Academy, the respectful Karl brought another 20-year-old youth out and towards the library. As they passed through the sports field, a few seniors noted the group with looks of surprise. Their comments could be heard from all directions. "AI, isn't that person walking over there Lord Cheng? He hasn't been seen around the academy for over a year already. What wind blew him here today?" A senior around the same age as him said in surprise. "I've heard that a year ago, Lord Cheng had already reached the middle levels of sainthood, so there's no telling how strong he is now. Lord Cheng is definitely the genius of Kargath Academy. He had condensed a saint weapon at the age of 19 and became a saint. At the age of 20, he then reached the middle levels of sainthood. 1 year has passed already, so the Lord Cheng must have reached the upper levels of sainthood with his talent in cultivation. Definitely, Lord Cheng is the #1 genius at cultivation at Kargath Academy." The headmaster had even said before that by the age of 23, Lord Cheng would definitely become a great saint. Becoming a great saint by the age of 23, Lord Cheng is truly amazing. Many of the seniors in Kargath Academy are still at the rank of the 10th layer of Saint Force. As Karl walked down the path slowly, the seniors that saw the pair walk by continued to gossip. Lord Cheng was a very well-known figure within Kargath Academy, not for his character, but for his cultivation rate that would astound anyone. Within the Tian Yuan continent, he could be considered to be a prodigy blessed by the heavens, and in Kargath Academy, he could be considered as standing at the peak of the strongest experts. At this moment, Jian Shen was still pouring his interest into the book in his hands, completely unaware of the incoming trouble. Chapter 28, Incoming Trouble, 2. In a flash, Luo Yun and Luo Jian arrived at the library gates. A few feet away from the big gates, the one who had been trailing Jian Shen, Chen Feng, was leaning against a tree trunk. His eyes were constantly watching Jian Shen, who was still reading with relish, and had completely forgotten about his surroundings. When Chen Feng saw Luo Yun with Luo Jian by his side, he immediately ran over to them. He bowed at Luo Jian, and with a charming face, said, "I didn't think that I would meet the Lord Luo Jian here. I am truly honored to see you." Chen Feng was extremely respectful, although he too belonged to a clan. Within the Jessen kingdom, it was a very minor one. It was only when he was joined together with the children of bigger clans that he dared to collect money from those weaker than him. With this, he had a strong relationship with the Luo clan that would definitely bring him many benefits. If he was lucky, then his own clan would be pulled up into the higher ranks with the help of Luo Jian. After all, Luo Jian was to be the clan's successor. Luo Jian felt proud as he looked at the respectful Chen Feng, and gave a small wave of his hand. "Don't say any more crap. Is Changyang Xiang Tian in the library?" Even though Luo Jian had absolutely no trace of politeness, Chen Feng's look of respect didn't waver in the least. With a smile, he replied, "He is. Changyang Xiang Tian is still in the library." A sneer gradually formed on Luo Jian's face, as he got the answer he wanted. That's good. Go inside and call him out for me. The library had a rule that all fighting inside was prohibited, and even Luo Jian had to respect that rule, despite his family having a great amount of influence. Yes, of course, Master Luo. I'll have Changyang Xiang Tian out immediately, Chen Feng said compliantly as he entered the library. Inside the library, Jian Chen's focus was still on his book. Whenever he was in the library, his guard was at its lowest. This was because within the library, he didn't have to worry about others causing trouble or asking questions, so remaining on guard wasn't needed. While Jian Chen was lost in his own world, he had the sudden feeling of someone's hand clasping down on his shoulder. Although he was still reluctant to part from his book, he looked to the youth standing next to me with a cold sneer on his face. From his memory, he remembered that this person was one of the 4 people who had tried to extort protection money from him. Chen Feng stood by his side with a look of great joy at Jian Chen's impending doom. With a strange tone, he said, Changyang Xiang Tian, I didn't think we'd see each other again so soon. It's you. Jian Chen scowled. Without giving him face, he spoke, if you're still looking for protection money, then you can scram. Chen Feng's eyes flashed with anger, but he didn't dare make a move towards Jian Chen. The library was strict on their rules, and he was sure that he wasn't a match for Jian Chen. Chen Feng stuck his chest out as he glared maliciously at Jian Chen, and coldly said, Changyang Xiang Tian, although I am no match for you, Kargath Academy is not someplace you can rampage around. If you really have the guts, then follow me outside. Otherwise, prepare to stay in this library for the rest of your life. After dropping these words, Chen Feng directly walked out of the library. However, the words he had said had already attracted the attentions of all the students within the library. Immediately, many people began to shift their attentions to Jian Chen with complicated expressions of envy, respect, and jealousy. Jian Chen slowly closed the book with a crossed expression. From Chen Feng's words it would seem that he got reinforcements to help him. Jian Chen's eyes twinkled as he put the book back on the bookshelf and then walked towards the entrance of the library deep in thought. Although he knew people were waiting outside for him, if he didn't go out then people would think he was afraid of them. If Jian Chen wanted to continue reading books in the library in peace, then he would need to reveal his own strength and inspire fear into the others. Otherwise more and more people would come and find trouble with him. There would be no point in coming to the library in that case. Although he knew that the people outside were definitely not weak, it was possible that they were experts at the same level as Ka Di Yun. However, Jian Chen still did not show any trace of fear. He was confident that if he faced a saint at his current level, even if he didn't win, he would not easily lose. After all, no matter if it were battle experience or techniques, Jian Chen far surpassed anyone else at the academy. Moreover, he was a person who had experienced countless life or death situations. As soon as Jian Chen left the library, he looked up to find 3 youths standing outside the door. They didn't look very different from each other, as they all wore the school uniform. 2 of the people were part of the extortion group Jian Chen had met before, and the third one was looking at Jian Chen with an expression full of arrogance. It was obvious that he had been a helper summoned by the other 2. Seeing Jian Chen actually walk out of the library, Luo Yun began to laugh evilly. He whispered to Luo Jian standing next to him, "My lord, he is Changyang Xiang Tian." Luo Jian's arrogant eyes sized up Jian Chen with an expression of disdain, and he coldly said, "Brat, are you Changyang Xiang Tian?" Jian Chen gave Luo Jian a level look. Luo Jian looked to be around 22 to 23 years old, and he had an extremely handsome appearance. However, his expression did not hide any of his arrogance. "And who are you?" Jian Chen indifferently replied to Luo Jian, his tone ice cold. Luo Yun, who was standing next to Luo Jian, shouted, "How dare you, Changyang Xiang Tian? What kind of status do you have to dare to use that kind of tone to talk to my clan's lord? Do you want to get kicked out of this academy? Changyang Xiang Tian, hurry up and apologize to my lord. Otherwise, don't think you can stay at Kargath Academy for much long." Chen Feng did not miss the chance to suck up to Luo Jian, and yelled back at Jian Chen in an indignant tone. Hearing these two's words, the Luo clan's lord, Luo Jian, became even haughtier, and his face was full of self-pride. Jian Chen's unchanged face gradually showed a hint of a sneer, and he looked at the three people with disdain, and said, "Based on your words, are you saying that the headmaster of Kargath Academy will listen to you three? Or perhaps, are you saying that Kargath Academy belongs to your clan, whoever you want to leave must leave? The three of you are really too audacious, to even dare to look down on the headmaster." Hearing Jian Chen's words, the expression of both Luo Yun and Chen Feng suddenly paled. Even Luo Jia, who had a huge clan backing him up, he could not stop his expression from turning unsightly, as he glared poisonously at Jian Chen. Although he had the most influence backing him up out of the three since Luo Jian was the successor of Jessen Kingdom's powerful Luo clan, he did not dare to show any disrespect towards the headmaster of Kargath Academy. If Jian Chen's words spread to the headmaster's ears, then they would be heavily punished. In the worst-case scenario, they could be directly expelled. Even if Luo Jian had a powerful background, even if his father was Luo clan's clan leader, even if he was Luo clan's successor, there was no way he could get away of such a consequence completely cop-free. His Luo clan would definitely not be willing to offend Kargath Academy's headmaster for his sake. Luo Jian's face turned gloomy, and he glared at Jian Chen. "Changyang Xiang Tian, you really are quite arrogant. I just wonder if you have the qualifications to be so arrogant." Jian Chen laughed in disdain, and coldly replied, "Stop wasting your breath, just say why you've come looking for me." Luo Jian let out a smile filled with a murderous intent. "The reason I came is very simple. I just wanted to see how someone like you defeated a recently advanced saint, even if Ka Diyun didn't use a saint weapon. Changyang Xiang Tian, are you really that amazing?" Luo Jian cracked the knuckles on both his hands before clenching them both. The loud snapping sound from his knuckles was clear to hear as a strong amount of energy started to emit from his body onto Jian Chen's own. At the same time, the people who were reading their books inside the library all closed their books. Everyone started to chatter excitedly as they watched the events that were happening with Jian Chen with pleasure. Regarding the qi that Luo Jian was emitting, Jian Chen was not affected at all and stood straight like a towering mountain. Luo Jian's strength was clear to Jian Chen and was not at all weaker to Ka Diyun. However, it was not strong enough for him to fear. Instead, his fighting spirit rose. As soon as they saw the two opponents were about to start fighting, the people in front of the library began to retreat, afraid that they would be affected by any shockwaves. How could we miss such an interesting battle? Just before the two people were about to begin fighting, a voice suddenly rang out from the back, and a few youths wearing the school uniform walked out from behind. There were a total of 5 people that had just arrived. Among them, one of the people was another person from the extortion group that Jian Chen had encountered earlier. Jian Chen did not recognize the other 4, but anyone could tell with a single glance that they were from major clans. Their brows seemed to hold an aloof and remote expressions. However, what drew Jian Chen's attention was the youth standing in the center of the group of 5. It was obvious from his eyes that he was the core figure the other 4 revolved around. He didn't seem that old. Based on his appearance, he was probably around 20 years old. "Yeah. Everyone, look, isn't the person in the middle Master Cheng, who's been missing the past year? I didn't imagine that he would also come." "That's right, it really is Master Cheng, our Kargath Academy's genius. It's said that a year ago, his power had already reached the middle saint levels. With his talent in cultivation, I had thought during the past year, Master Cheng had already broken through to the great saint level and graduated. I didn't think that he was actually still on the academy grounds. I wonder what Master Cheng's current power is, and whether or not he has reached great saint level yet." The 3 people next to Master Cheng seemed to be powerful saints who have already condensed their saint weapons. To think that the elites that are normally rare to see would all appear here. Seeing the students standing there, all of the students started to shout in alarm, rapidly increasing the noise in the environment. "Qingmingxiang, you've come at just the right time. If you were the slightest bit late, you would have missed this interesting show." Seeing the youth amongst the crowd, Luo Jian immediately stopped his imposing manner, and laughed as he greeted the youth. He then nodded at the other 3 students following behind. Chapter 29. Another encounter with Tai Ta. Qing Mingxiang started to smile. How could I miss a match like this? He stared down at Jian Chen with disdain before saying, Do you think that's Changyang Xiang Tian? Correct, Lord Cheng. He's definitely that Changyang Xiang Tian who hurt our companions. Luo Jian said as he stood behind Carl. Qing Mingxiang nodded his head and said slowly, Changyang Xiang Tian, you're definitely not bad, to even hurt my comrades. His voice was getting darker with each word. Jian Chen's mind already understood that these were a group of unreasonable children with rich parents, so arguing with them was of no use. They would only listen to force. Thus, Jian Chen didn't bother to say any trash talk. Instead, he said coldly, So what if we fight? If you're not happy with this, make the first move instead of spouting so much bullshit. Hearing Jian Chen's words, Qing Mingxiang's face gradually turned ashen. Good. Good, good. Then it's time to see how strong you really are. With that, his body started to glow so brightly that the light extended 10 meters away to where Jian Chen was. Dashing forward, he launched his fist towards Jian Chen's nose. Against a person who wasn't even a saint, he wouldn't even bother using his saint weapon. Even Jian Chen knew that Qing Mingxiang's strength far surpassed Ka Diyun. The difference in saint force was far too great with his own as well. Therefore, Jian Chen absolutely could not afford to take that fist. Just when Qing Mingxiang's fist was about to connect with Jian Chen's head, his head suddenly blurred and dodged the fist. At the same time, Jian Chen's two fists went up to grab at the incoming arm from Qing Mingxiang. Assuming a horse stance, he stiffened his back and pulled at the arm with both of his own. Originally, when Qing Mingxiang was attacking, his center of gravity had been leaning forwards. Now, Jian Chen had pulled him further. He momentarily lost control over his body, and he began to fall forwards. However, Qing Mingxiang was quick to respond. Stamping on the ground with his foot, he exerted all his force to try to prevent any further pull from Jian Chen. As he did that, however, Jian Chen suddenly let go of Qing Mingxiang's arm and immediately pummeled at his stomach with a barrage of blows that were as fast as lightning. Since Qing Mingxiang's center of gravity was now focused towards the back, when Jian Chen had punched him with all his might, his legs couldn't help but stumbled backwards, as if he was struggling to avoid falling. After falling back 10 steps, Qing Mingxiang finally regained his bearings, but his face had long since turned into the same color as a pig's liver. With a dark and ominous expression, he glared at Jian Chen maliciously. Because of his majestic body, he was considered to have one of the strongest in the academy, so how could he not feel furious at this? If the academy found out his body was actually hit and injured like this, then he would no longer have face within the academy and become a laughing stock. After thinking about the consequences of this, he glared at Jian Chen with a stare that could kill, since this was an utter disgrace to him. Already, the entire audience had become absolutely quiet. Luo Jian's own face had become sluggish as he stared at Jian Chen with a surprised look. This was far beyond his wildest imagination, and not just his own, but everyone else watching. Qing Mingxiang was a talented genius when it came to cultivation, and even saints couldn't match him in a hand-to-hand fight. To have Jian Chen make him suffer such a loss and put him in such an ugly state was very surprising. Glaring once more at Jian Chen, Qing Mingxiang's arms started to release a silver type of qi before forming a two-handed sword. He snarled, saying, Changyang Xiang Tian, I will definitely cripple you today. With that declaration, he surged towards Jian Chen with the silver sword in tow. Stop! Right as Qing Mingxiang had started to move, another deep voice had shouted over the crowd and noise. Immediately, everyone saw a rather robust and suntanned youth slowly walk forward. When Jian Chen saw the sturdy youth come forward, his eyes widened in shock. It was because this person was also a participant in the freshman competition and the person with the heavenly blessed strength, Tai Ta. The moment when Luo Jian and Qing Mingxiang's men looked at Tai Ta, their faces started to change, an abject fear taking hold of them. Luo Yun didn't recognize Tai Ta at all, so with an arrogant cry towards Tai Ta, he demanded, Who are you? This is business concerning Lord Luo and Lord Sheng, so don't interfere, otherwise you'll regret it. Shut your mouth. Not even waiting for Luo Yun to finish talking, Luo Jian cut into Luo Yun's speech. Not even paying attention to Luo Yun's look of surprise, Luo Jian's face contained a smile towards Tai Ta as he cupped his hands in salute. So it was Brother Tai Ta after all. This one wonders what Brother Tai Ta is doing here. Tai Ta looked at him with a strange look before speaking in a low voice. Who are you? I don't recognize you at all. Not understanding why Luo Jian's face became so unsightly, Tai Ta directly walked towards Jian Chen and lifted his hand to clasp onto Jian Chen's shoulder. Changyang Xiang Tian, I didn't think I'd meet you here of all places. It has been so many days since I last saw you. He boomed. Jian Chen also gave a faint laugh. Tai Ta, let us put off this chat for now and let me take care of a few troublesome matters first. Listening to what Jian Chen said, Tai Ta's head whipped over to Qing Mingxiang and Luo Jian's group and slowly stared at them before pointing a finger. Changyang Xiang Tian, could it be that they're trying to bully you? It could be said that way, yes, Jian Chen indifferently said as he crossed his arms in front of his chest. As soon as he heard this, Tai Ta immediately rolled up his sleeves. He fiercely looked at the opposing group of people and loudly declared, Changyang Xiang Tian is my brother. Anyone who bullies him is bullying me as well. Whoever wants fight, come out. Even though my power might not be that strong, I, Tai Ta, am not afraid of you guys. Hearing Tai Ta's words, Jian Chen hesitated for a second. He looked at Tai Ta in confusion, not quite understand when he had become Tai Ta's brother. Qing Mingxiang and Luo Jian's expressions changed. They glanced at each other with a serious look. It was obvious that they were somewhat afraid of Tai Ta. Even though Tai Ta's actual power wasn't very strong, and they could easily defeat him in a fight, Tai Ta had a formidable supporter that even the two of them were afraid to encounter. This was why they had never dared to touch Tai Ta at Kargath Academy. Neither of the people spoke, and Carl and Luo Yun had already realized from Luo Jian's attitude that Tai Ta's identity was not normal. Thus, they made the smart decision of not making a sound. At that moment, the atmosphere had become slightly strange. After quietly pondering for a while, Luo Jian was the first to break the silence. Brother Tai Ta, this is a problem between me and Changyang Xiang Tian. I hope you don't meddle with our affairs. Luo Jian's tone was extremely polite. He clearly understood that although Tai Ta was a commoner, his current status was without a doubt not any less powerful than his. It was even higher than his by a bit. Even if he was the successor to the Luo clan, his status was at most equivalent to Tai Ta's. Luo Jian's words made all the spectators shocked. There were quite a few seniors amongst them that recognized both Luo Jian and Qing Mingxiang, and they knew that although their individual statuses weren't that high, they both had great clans backing them up. And yet, at the moment, the two of them had suddenly acted polite to Tai Ta. This made the library spectators curious about Tai Ta's identity. They couldn't imagine what kind of background Tai Ta must have to have been so domineering, and to make the insufferably arrogant Luo Jian and Qing Mingxiang so cautious and fearful. Unfortunately, Tai Ta had no intention to appreciate the offer. Without giving face, he said, I already said earlier, Changyang Xiang Tian is my brother. His problems are my problems. If anyone has complaints, then everyone should direct them towards me. Luo Jian's expression changed colors, and his eyes showed a serious expression. In regards to Tai Ta, he really didn't dare to offend him too much. At that moment, Qing Mingxiang snorted, and he glared at Tai Ta. In a heavy voice, he said, Tai Ta, do you really want to butt into this business? Having suffered from Jian Chen's hands, Qing Mingxiang had already formed a hatred for Jian Chen in his heart. For a freshman that hadn't even reached saint level yet to have put him in such a difficult situation was definitely a humiliation to his genius. If he didn't clean this situation up now, then he wouldn't be able to enjoy his time at the academy in the future. That's right, I want to get involved. Tai Ta yelled back, his expression harsh. Even though he clearly knew how powerful Qing Mingxiang was, Tai Ta still did not show any sign of fear. Jian Chen pulled at Tai Ta and said, Tai Ta, this is something between me and him. You shouldn't come, otherwise, you'll just get caught up in more trouble. Tai Ta's eyes flashed with anger, and he suddenly turned towards Jian Chen, frowning, Changyang Xiang Tian, what kind of words are those? Do you think that I, Tai Ta, is someone who would be scared of these things? Do you not think of me as your friend? Hearing this, Jian Chen could not help but feel puzzled. When had he and Tai Ta gotten so close? They barely even met each other. The only time they had really interacted was during the freshman martial arts competition. Humph, Tai Ta. Since you want to suffer so badly, then don't blame me. Don't think that just because you're the headmaster's apprentice, I won't dare to attack you. Let me witness exactly how great the headmaster's apprentice's abilities are. Hearing Qingming Yan's words, Jian Chen was internally shocked. He hadn't imagined that Tai Ta had actually become the headmaster's apprentice. If this news was spread throughout the academy, it would spur a great craze. At this moment, Qingming Yang had already appeared in front of Tai Ta, and directly struck his fist against Tai Ta's chest. Because Tai Ta had a special status, Qingming Xiang did not dare to actually hurt Tai Ta, and his fist only used fifth layer force. In his opinion, even if he only used the strength of the fifth layer, it still wasn't an attack that a saint could receive, let alone someone below that, like Tai Ta. Faced with Qingming Xiang's attack, Tai Ta did not dare to be careless, and his face showed matchless concentration. He roared, then with his right arm seemingly as sturdy as steel, he fearlessly threw a fist at Qingming Xiang to meet force with force. Chapter 31, A Breakthrough. Peak of the 10th layer. Bian's terrifying gaze lingered on Luo Jian for some time before snorting loudly. His gaze then shifted over to the still fighting Tai Ta and Qingming Xiang before he said in a low voice, "Are you still not stopping?" His voice boomed like thunder, as the two people were struck by the loud echo, causing them to temporarily go deaf. Tai Ta and Qingming Xiang immediately paused, the moment they saw the vice headmaster. Tai Ta suddenly smiled with no small amount of excitement. Qingming Xiang's face, on the other hand, changed into one full of fear. Tai Ta walked up to Jian Chen and slowly looked him over carefully. In a low voice, he whispered, "Changyang Xiang Tian, are you hurt?" Jian Chen only shook his head before giving him a meaningful stare to stay silent. Tai Ta only laughed in response. Although he had the heart and body of a tiger, he could understand the meaning behind Jian Chen's actions. Without saying anything more, he stood behind Jian Chen and remained silent as per his wishes. However, Tai Ta still continued to look carefully at Qingming Xiang and winked at him as if to provoke him. Clearly the fight he had just now wasn't enough for him to fully enjoy it. The vice headmaster, Bian, shot a strong glance towards Luo Jian and Qingming Xiang. "Luo Jian, you've already broken the rules of the academy, you know your crime." Luo Jian lifted his head in aggravation. "Vice headmaster, giving pointers amongst students is very common. Changyang Xiang Tian and I were only doing that and not anything else. As for me breaking the academy rules, your student inquires of you, which rule did I break?" "Humph, you still dare to quibble like this." Bian growled. "Luo Jian, what is the 66th rule for Kargath Academy?" Luo Jian titled his head in thought before answering. "The 66th rule is that fighting in the library and the destruction of the library is prohibited." Bian continued to stare at him. "If it weren't for me blocking your sword chi, then I'm afraid that the library gates would have been broken by you." "Luo Jian, do you recognize your crime now?" Luo Jian's face suddenly dropped after hearing that. What the vice headmaster said was correct. If the sword chi he had shot out was dodged by Jian Chen and continued onwards, then the library gates would have been broken beyond repair and might have also hurt the audience that was watching. Whether or not Jian Chen would have been able to dodge the sword chi, Luo Jian didn't dare to say. If he did voice out this scenario, then he was afraid of another charge being dropped on him. Because the school had clear-cut rules, it said that students were free to give each other pointers, but if they were to intentionally hurt someone, then they would be severely punished. Besides, he had deliberately used his sword chi to injure someone who wasn't even a saint yet, so the situation was even more complex. Although he had expected this type of end result, he had thought that he would be able to get away with more. But since the vice headmaster was here, the situation had developed into a way he hadn't expected. Right now, in Luo Jian's heart, he could only hope that the vice headmaster wouldn't give them too harsh of a punishment. Luo Jian has recognized his crimes, he said in direction of the vice headmaster. He didn't dare be arrogant. Biyao snorted once more to himself before saying, Luo Jian, you have already violated one of the rules of the academy. I therefore sentence you to the contemplation hall to reflect on your crimes for a month. Do you have any objections? The contemplation hall was where students who had violated the rules of the academy would go to. Although it had the word hall in its name, it was nothing more than a small stone house. It was smaller than a dorm room and could hold only one person within it. Once the door was closed, the person inside would be placed inside a pitch-dark room. No matter how strong the outside light was, it would not be able to penetrate through the stone house. Aside from seeing nothing, no sound would be able to get across either. Even if the strongest hailstorm was happening, the person inside would not notice a thing. Luo Jian has understood with all of his heart, and has no objection, he said with a bow of his head. His tone was respectful, and no one would have thought that while he looked repentant, the poison in his heart was growing with his grievances against Jianshen. The vice headmaster nodded his head, a jollier expression was returning to his face. You may leave then and look for the contemplation hall yourself to reflect. Afterwards, Biyao turned his eyes towards the anxious Qing Mingxiang. Qing Mingxiang, even with your strength, to think that you were bullying a freshman, our Kargath Academy has lost face because of you. Qing Mingxiang expressionlessly said, Vice Headmaster's teachings are correct. Ming Xiang understands his wrongs, and will not repeat them ever again. Qing Mingxiang, I hope that you bear in mind, this is Kargath Academy, not your Huayan sect. If you want to continue living within Kargath Academy, then you must learn to comply with the rules. Otherwise, even if you are the young lord of the Huayan sect, you will be punished accordingly. I hope that there won't be a repeat of this event. You may leave. When it came to Qing Mingxiang, the vice headmaster was somewhat afraid of the consequences and didn't dare to punish him anymore. Qing Mingxiang did not utter another word, as he and his followers quietly left the place. Seeing the worst come to pass, Luo Yun, Chen Feng, and Carl did not continue to stick around, and left dejectedly. Once the crowds had dispersed, the vice headmaster's gaze rested on Jianshen, and he smiled. You must be Changyang Xiang Tian. Jianshen nodded, and in a tone that was neither overbearing nor servile, he replied, Yes, I am him. The vice headmaster properly sized Changyang Xiang Tian up, and his previously solemn expression disappeared. He smiled and said, having not yet achieved saint level and yet still managed to force Luo Jian to summon his saint weapon, Changyang Xiang Tian, you're quite good. Vice headmaster, you're exaggerating too much. It was only due to a moment of fortune, Jianshen plainly replied, his expression completely devoid of any arrogance. As his eyes gazed at Jianshen's collected expression, vice headmaster, Biyao, nodded his head in praise. Changyang Xiang Tian, you need to properly cultivate and aim to become saint level as soon as possible. Many thanks to the vice headmaster's concern. I will definitely continue to cultivate diligently, Jianshen smiled. Afterwards, Bayan's gaze returned to Tai Ta, although now that you're the headmaster's apprentice, your identity has changed, you must still remember that only by improving your own power by yourself will you really earn people's respect. Only that way can you support yourself in Tian Yuan continent. Do you understand? Tai Ta cleverly nodded, and replied in a muffled voice, Tai Ta understands. Yes. The vice headmaster nodded, and continued, although you are at the peak of talents, and your future is boundless, you cannot, under any circumstance, become confident. You must always face everything in a calm and collected manner. You also cannot learn anything from those aristocratic families, since you are now the headmaster's apprentice. Your future training will be more arduous, and you will have to spend more time on cultivation. You definitely cannot waste the headmaster's painstaking efforts. At these words, Tai Ta patted his chest and promised Biyao, Vice Headmaster, don't worry. I, Tai Ta, will definitely cultivate diligently. I will absolutely not make Master lose face. The Vice Headmaster smiled and nodded, leaving the room. Once he had left, Jianshen and Tai Ta chatted for a bit longer, and after exchanging goodbyes, Jianchen returned to the library to read his books. When Jianchen returned to the library, the students originally watching from within the library all disappeared without a trace. Not long after, the two moving news had traveled around the entire Kargath Academy at an unbelievable rate. The freshman martial arts competition's second place, Tai Ta, actually became Kargath Academy's headmaster's apprentice. Moreover, he had an intense fight with the cultivation genius, Qing Mingxiang. The freshman martial arts competition's freshman ruler, Changyang Xiang Tian, used only his bare hands, and managed to force a middle saint level, Luo Jian, to use his saint weapon in a battle. Finally, Luo Jian disturbed vice headmaster Bai En, and ended up being confined in the contemplation hall for a whole month as punishment. These two pieces of news had already been spread to every corner of Kargath Academy in the short span of 2 hours' time, shocking both teachers and students alike. At the same time, Tai Ta had become the most well-known celebrity in Kargath Academy. He was originally just a commoner, but now that his identity had gone through world-shaking changes, nobles that had originally looked down on him because of his background now looked at him with new expressions. From that day on, Tai Ta had also become the child that people with varying amounts of influence tried to rope into their families. Although Jian Chen's name had also spread around the academy, it had already completely been overtaken by the extreme radiance from Tai Ta's news. However, Jian Chen paid no mind to it. Despite this, there were still many female students that looked at Jian Chen with sparkling gazes of infatuation. Jian Chen's appearance was extremely handsome, and was definitely not any lower than any other male in Kargath Academy. Combined with his unique grandeur and his powerful abilities, he was definitely a lady killer. Thus, in Kargath Academy, Jian Chen had become the white prince in many of the girls' hearts. Ever since the battle at the library, Jian Chen's days had been anything but calm. Every time he entered the school grounds, he would be swarmed by countless male students trying to come up with various excuses to fight him. Even when he went to the library to read, he would still be harassed by quite a few people, making it so that he couldn't even read peacefully. Up until now, Jian Chen had also acted and disciplined a few people because they had been condescending children from rich backgrounds. However, perhaps because Jian Chen was too forgiving in his discipline, his attempts had close to no deterring effects, and were pretty much completely overlooked. Finally, the helpless Jian Chen was forced to bring the books back to his dorm to read under the vice headmaster's permission. Aside from reading, Jian Chen spent almost all his spare time cultivating. The time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 3 months had already passed. It was morning, and the sun had just risen. Sitting cross-legged on his bed, Jian Chen gradually opened his eyes, and in that instant, a light flashed within his eyes. Jian Chen lowered his head and slowly spread out his palms. He saw that his hands were empty, as the Class 3 monster core he had been holding had already completely disappeared. Sensing the strong saint force flowing through his body in a manner similar to great rivers, Jian Chen finally smiled. He had broken through to the 10th saint force layer. After 3 months of cultivation, he had already broken through to the 10th layer. He was only 1 step away from reaching the saint level, and could break through at any moment. The Class 3 monster core from the freshman martial arts competition had already been completely used up by him. Although it was said that Class 3 monster core contained large amounts of energy, the amount that Jian Chen needed for his cultivation was far greater than that of an average person's. After all, the abilities that he achieved through his cultivation were extremely terrifying. Thus, a Class 3 monster core that could allow an average person at the 8th layer reach a middle saint level, could only help Jian Chen reach the peak of the 10th layer. Chapter 32, Monster Core Hunt. Jian Chen looked outside at the sky from his window. The sun had been out for a while, so Jian Chen knew that it was no longer early in the morning. Today was a special day for Kargath Academy since this was when they would hold a large-scale event where all the students and teachers would take part in. This event was called the Wilderness Survival. Every student would have to leave Kargath Academy to live in the forest 20 miles away for 3 days. Within the 3 days, every student had to have at least 2 Class 1 monster cores. For those who reached the saint level, then they would need 2 Class 2 monster cores. The amount of monster cores wasn't limited, but whoever got the most monster cores would be gifted with a rich reward, an Earth Attribute Class 4 monster core as well as a space ring. The reward was so tempting, that if put under the nose of the children from rich backgrounds, even they would become emotionally moved from it. At the same time, any student that had reached this standard could also access the books about various battle skills and cultivation methods on the library's 4th level. This reward was especially enticing to those from average commoner families. Battle skills were techniques that could create strong attacks. Along with the distinct uses of Saint Force, it could boost one's power to 120%, making them techniques that would completely surpass one's original abilities. On the other hand, cultivation methods could only be used when one reached the saint level. Some commoner families didn't even know the lowest level cultivation methods, and so children born in these families have to rely on the superficial breathing method given to them to cultivate Saint Force. These breathing methods were circulated around the entire Tianyuan continent. Their steps were extremely simple, so most commoner families knew everything about these methods. The only downside was that these breathing methods could only help them cultivate to the 10th Saint Force layer, and were completely useless to people who had already reached Saint level. Thus, battle skills and cultivation methods were seen as unattainable treasures to commoners. On Tianyuan continent, all the battle skills and cultivation methods were divided into 4 levels: human tier, earth tier, heaven tier, and saint tier. Every tier were then split into 3 separate levels: primary, middle and advanced. After leaving the dorms, Jianghu headed straight for the sports field. The event had already been announced 3 days ago, and by now, almost all the students had finished their preparations for it by sharpening themselves to the peak of their abilities. By the time Jianghu had arrived at the sports field, the place was already swarming with people. However, it was still obvious to see that the people were split into 2 groups. One of the groups was a gathering of all the nobles, and the other group was entirely made up of commoners who did not have any major backgrounds. All the students that had not yet reached saint level were holding a steel weapon that were glistening under the sun. Since they were facing beasts, the school administration had allowed them to choose their own weapons. Jianghu walked over to the weapons rack. However, when he saw all the weapons there, his brows could not help but knit together. The good weapons had pretty much all been chosen by the students already, and the only ones remaining that were of decent quality were the heavy type weapons that required a lot of strength to use. They were not at all compatible with Jianghu. Jianghu swept a glance over the entire weapons rack. When he noticed a fractured iron rod that was about the thickness of his finger, his eyes suddenly lit up. He exerted all his strength to pull it out, only to discover that the iron rod was about 3 inches long and its surface was already completely covered in dark yellow rust marks. One of the ends had an extremely sharp point. Jianghu weighed the rusted iron rod in his hands and then tested its sturdiness, before nodding in satisfaction. This iron rod seemed somewhat unsuitable at a glance, but its heaviness and length were compatible with Jianghu, and amongst the remaining weapons, only this iron rod would be able to bring out most of Jianghu's abilities. At this moment, Tai Ta walked out from the crowd. On his back was an enormous axe that was practically as large as him. It made Tai Ta seem even more impressive and powerful. Tai Ta walked up to Jianghu and his gaze rested on the stained iron rod in Jianghu's hands. His eyes could not help but show confusion as he asked, "Hi, Changyang Xiang Tian, what are you doing with an iron rod?" Jianghu laughed. "What else could I do with it? Of course it's to be used as a weapon." "No way, Changyang Xiang Tian, you're actually using this lousy iron rod as a weapon? You. Is your brain okay?" Tai Ta asked in shock. Jianghu chuckled and did not explain any further. Although Tai Ta could not understand why Jianghu would use such a lousy iron rod as a weapon, he did not continue to pursue this question. Instead, he said, "Changyang Xiang Tian, how about the 2 of us team up? If we join hands, then none of the Class 1 magical beasts can obstruct us. We would even be able to overwhelm a Class 2 magical beast. Moreover, I've been hunting wild beasts in these types of forests since I was young, and I've gradually learned quite a bit of experience about surviving in the wild. If you're together with me, I promise that you won't have any hardships." Jianchen considered it for a while. Finally, he nodded his head in agreement at Tai Ta's offer. The school did not prohibit students from forming groups of 3 to 5 people to kill the magical beasts, so many students ended up moving together as small groups. At that moment, a handsome noble carrying an arrogant air walked up to Tai Ta and smiled. "Hello Tai Ta, my name is Xiaomi Si. I'm at the peak of the 10th Saint Force layer. Do you want to become partners with me? I believe that if we join hands, hunting magical beasts will be much easier for us both." Tai Ta glanced at Xiaomi Si and shook his head. "No need, Changyang Xiang Tian and I together are enough. We don't need any more people to join." Faced with Tai Ta's rejection, Xiaomi Si did not show any despair. He turned to look at Jianchen, and his face immediately turned haughty. This person must be Changyang Xiang Tian, the 4th lord from Lore City's Changyang clan. My father is the leader of the Xiaomi clan in Forbidden City. Does Junior Changyang Xiang Tian welcome me into your group? Although Xiaomi Si's words were still in a relatively respectful tone, his words hid a threatening force behind them. Forbidden City was a king's city, and when it came to the Jessen Kingdom, Forbidden City was considered to be an imperial city because the imperial palace was situated in Forbidden City. Hearing the forcefulness behind Xiaomi Si's words, Jianchen knit his brows. He swept his gaze over Xiaomi Si's handsome face, and coldly replied, "I apologize, but we no longer need any additional people. After all, we're only facing Class 1 magical beasts, so we don't have the time to spare babysitting others." Hearing this, Xiaomi Si immediately turned the color of pig liver. His face darkened at Jianchen's meaning, and it was obvious that Jianchen was looking down on Xiaomi Si's abilities. Xiaomi Si's face grew stormy, and he maliciously glared at Jianchen's indifferent expression, before coldly snorting and walking away. After Xiaomi Si left, quite a few people from complex backgrounds approached. These people did not want to greet Tai Ta, but only wanted to join his group. However, all of them were rejected. Tai Ta had no feelings for any of these people, and he was unwilling to interact much with them. After everyone had left, a youth around 20 years old, with a tall and sturdy stature, not very different from Tai Ta's, walked over from the distance. He walked straight towards Jianchen, and reached his hand out to strongly pat Jianchen's shoulder and laughed. "Fourth brother, you become the school celebrity now. Amongst all of Kargath Academy's students, I'm sure that at this point, there is nobody that doesn't know of your reputation. Not bad, not bad. You haven't lost Changyang clan's face, and your older brother has been able to draw on some of your spotlight too." The sturdy youth was Jianchen's older brother, Changyang. He was currently sporting an extremely happy expression, and it was clear that his excitement was genuine. Jianchen smiled. "Big brother, stop joking around. Oh right, you've come at a perfect time. Why don't we join groups for this event?" Changyang shook his head as he seemed to have thought of something. He happily replied, "Fourth brother, if you had asked me a week ago, perhaps your older brother would have agreed to form a group with you. However, I can't right now, because a week ago, your brother finally broke through to the saint level, thus becoming a saint. This means that during today's event, I will be entering the 3rd layer to kill Class 2 magical beasts, so I can't be together with you." While saying this, a powerful saint force was emitted from Changyang's body, his hands glowing with a yellow light, forming a large, double-edged battle axe. The battle axe was about as large as a wash basin, and gave off a yellow glow. "Fourth brother, not bad, right? After I broke through to saint level, I was shocked to discover that I actually have the earth attribute," Changyang said proudly. Saints that had attributes normally had huge advantages when fighting saints without attributes. If the two had the exact same levels of strength and fought each other, under normal circumstances, the saint with attributes would ultimately be the victor. A person could only discover if their saint force had attributes after breaking through to the saint level. Thus, anyone that had not yet become a saint were not able to detect if their saint force had attributes or not. However, the chances of having an attributed saint force were extremely low. On average, 1 out of 1,000 saints could use attributes in their saint force. In addition, pretty much all of the ones gathered in Kargath Academy were the ones that had the highest potential in all of Jesson Kingdom. That's why it was perfectly normal for many saints to have attributed saint force amongst a group of 1,000 students. Seeing the double-edged battle-axe in Jianghu's hands, Jianchen could not help but happily smile. "Big brother, congratulations for successfully breaking through and becoming a saint. You even have an attribute." Jianghu's expression was extremely happy, and he reached his hand to point at a few youths that were with him. "That's right, fourth brother, I must introduce these people to you. These are the relatively outstanding children directly under my command. Their names are Changyang Ao Jian, Changyang Feng, and Changyang Xiao Tian. We greet the fourth master." The three youths simultaneously bent over in greeting, their attitudes extremely respectful. The hierarchy in the Changyang clan was extremely strict, so although they were the more outstanding members of the Changyang clan, their statuses were much lower than Jianchen's. Even though they were all older than Jianchen, they still had to treat Jianchen with a respectful manner. Moreover, while saluting the younger Jianchen, the three of them did not feel any traces of unfairness. On the contrary, they actually felt a sense of pride. After all, Jianchen had managed to defeat the saint, Ka Diyun, when he was only at the 8th Saint Force layer, and had managed to fight to a standstill while barehanded against Luo Jian. Finally, he had even forced Luo Jian to use his saint weapon. All of Jianchen's achievements made the entire Kargath Academy sigh in admiration. In the presence of the other members of the Changyang clan, they couldn't help but feel proud. Not just because Jianchen was a member of their clan, but that because he was the fourth lord of the Changyang clan. Chapter 34. Casually hunting for monster cores. Looking at the detached head spin through the air as the body spasmed spraying blood, Tai Ta's face was full of alarm. At this moment they had easily killed a Class 1 magical beast, allowing himself to feel more confident about his strength. The cyan-colored viper hadn't even made Tai Ta expend a great amount of his energy at all. Jianshen slowly separated the body of the viper from the iron rod and wiped the blood onto the surrounding grass. It had actually been Jianshen who contributed the most in killing the Class 1 magical beast. If it were not for his lightning-quick thrust through the viper's body and dealing it a huge wound as it was pierced, then Tai Ta's battle-axe would not have been able to sever the snake's head. Recollecting his battle-axe, Tai Ta's face looked at the detached head proudly while stepping on the viper's dead carcass. Changyang Xiang Tian, this is a Class 1 magical beast? How weak it was. Jianshen laughed as he heard Tai Ta. It's not that the magical beasts are weak, it's because us two combined are too strong. Besides, this Class 1 magical beast wouldn't give much trouble for even a person who just recently broke through to becoming a saint. Tai Ta returned Jianchen's smile and wiped his battle-axe dry from the blood. Bringing it to his shoulder, he let loose a laugh and said, "If you say that, then doesn't that mean we can casually walk around and kill Class 1 magical beasts?" It looked as if Jianshen had came to a realization as his face revealed a joyful smile. "Not bad. With our two strengths, even if we were to fight against a Class 1 magical beast by ourselves we would be able to kill it easily. But if we were to join together, then no magical beast in the second region would be able to bring us trouble. The magical beasts here aren't strong because the academy had meant for them to be for students to help pick up battle experience. There won't be any strong magical beasts here, except," he trailed off in thought. Jianchen's silence caused Tai Ta to pause. "Except what? Unless we come across a group of magical beasts. However, we still don't know what's here or not." Jianchen's face was serious as he spoke. With his strength, Jianshen would not find any problems if he came across a Class 1 magical beast, but if he came across a whole group of them, then there would be no way at all. Tai Ta wrinkled his eyebrows together and said uncertainly, "That shouldn't be likely. I've been in the forests many times and never saw a whole bunch of magical beasts together. It's not for sure we won't. I've read up in the library on books pertaining to magical beasts. There are a few types of magical beasts that all live in a group together. Together, their power is strong and very rarely do they travel by themselves." Jianshen walked over to where the decapitated snake head was and only then did he realize that the viper was only 6 to 7 meters long. Using the iron rod to cut 7 meters in, he took out the rod from the viper's body to reveal a bloody crystal. Within the Tianyuan continent, there were many different types of monster cores, while their monster cores were not at all like each other. Some magical beasts had their monster core in the head, some in the pit of their stomachs, and some in their abdomen. The viper, for example, had its monster core within its tail, but Jian Shen had already known that a long time ago. Pung! Tai Ta brought down the battle axe on his shoulder into a tree. It sunk into the tree as smoothly like water in a bucket before he cried out loudly, "If there really are magical beasts that are in a group, Tai Ta will definitely kill them all." Jian Shen held the monster core he got from the cyan viper and rubbed it clean of blood with the nearby grass. Throwing it to Tai Ta, he said, "All right, there's no need to yell. There's a lot of magical beasts that travel in herds in the Tianyuan continent, but it doesn't mean we'll meet up with one for sure. Nothing is for sure, after all, this is the magical beast forest." Tai Ta snatched the monster core thrown at him and looked at Jian Shen weirdly. "What are you doing giving this to me?" Jian Shen laughed. "The viper was slain by you, so this monster core is yours by rights." Seeing Tai Ta trying to find a reason against this, Jian Shen continued to say, "This monster core is yours, don't say otherwise. Just take it. After all, we still have 3 more days, at our current rate we'll definitely be able to get a lot more, so I don't really care for this one monster core." "Huh, okay then. I'll be taking this monster core. The next monster core will be yours no matter who kills it then." Holding the bloodstained monster core high up in the air, Tai Ta was extremely happy. Though that was for sure, since this was the first monster core he had gotten after killing a Class 1 magical beast. Afterwards, the two of them continued on their way. Now that he knew that Jian Shen had an acute sense for detecting danger, Tai Ta had simply handed the patrolling duties to Jian Shen. On the other hand, he began to ceaselessly hack at the grass in front of them to clear their path. Although constantly waving the heavy battle axe around expended a great amount of energy, it was as simple as eating a meal to Tai Ta, who had godly strength. To him, this action wasn't the slightest bit taxing. After all, his strength was great enough to frighten others, and he seemed to have infinite amounts of energy as well. Thus, it was impossible for him to become exhausted in a situation like this. Not long after the two had left, Jian Shen's ears twitched, and his footsteps came to an abrupt halt. He stretched his hand out towards Tai Ta, who was currently slashing at the grass in front of them, and gestured at him to be silent. Tai Ta intuitively understood the situation, and stopped his attempt at hacking through the weeds. Tightly gripping the battle axe, he returned to Jian Shen's side, and stood shoulder to shoulder with him. Tai Ta's eyes flashed, as he inspected their surroundings with caution. Their breathing became very faint, as their expressions were filled with caution. The difference between the two was that Tai Ta was constantly looking around, while Jian Shen had gently closed his eyes in an attempt to sense everything around them. It was currently extremely difficult to discern anything among the grass. Even if there really was an unknown danger lurking around, it would unfortunately not be something that one could use the naked eye to see. Thus, Tai Ta could not discover anything despite sweeping his gaze around all 4 corners for a long period of time. Jian Shen lightly closed his eyes, his keen ears twitching periodically as they tried to catch all noises coming from his surroundings. At the same time, his consciousness also reached new heights, and he used his powerful soul to reach out and sense the world around him. At that moment, Jian Shen could not help but recall one of his fights against Duguchobai. Eventually, just as he was about to die, his powers had suddenly broken through and reached the realm of the sword god. At that moment, his soul had become incomparably strong and could even manifest it outside his body into the surrounding air. Whenever he spread his soul out into an area, then there would be no way anyone or anything inside would be able to escape his perception. However, what made Jian Shen feel regret was that after entering this world, although his soul was extremely powerful, he could no longer extend it outwards. Otherwise, this dense forest would not give Jian Shen any difficulties at all. Searching for a hidden magical beast would be extremely easy. Jian Shen's soul densely concentrated together, and he exerted all his efforts to sense his surroundings. Slowly, his spirit entered a unique state, although he had not extended his soul, at that instant, his soul seemed to have established a subtle relationship with the various plants around him, fusing together. This feeling was extremely mysterious. However, as soon as Jianchen entered this state, his senses immediately shot up to new levels. Finally, a barely discernible breathing sound entered his sensing range. The breath was so faint that even if one stood next to it, one most likely wouldn't have been able to hear it. In an instant, Jianchen opened his eyes, and in a flash, he had already disappeared from his original location, and was flying towards the side at high speeds. While moving, Jianchen constantly twisted and adjusted his body to evade the branches obstructing his path. In an instant, Jianchen had already crossed over a distance of 10 meters. He quickly thrusted out the iron rod in his hands at lightning-fast speed, silently cutting away the surrounding leaves and weeds, the tip aimed towards the black figure hiding within the grass. A.O. A shriek of pain suddenly rang out, as a dark shadow jumped out from the grass, leaping towards Jianchen with its ferocious mouth wide open. This was a black panther, around 2 meters long. Its head had an open wound where fresh blood was pouring out from. The blood flowed down through the black fur on its face, intensifying its fierce appearance. Jianchen's gaze was as sharp as a sword as a sneer began to form on his face. He shook his arm, and once again lashed out with the iron rod in his hand at an unfathomable speed, his objective being the Black Panther's neck. Up until the end, the Black Panther had absolutely no time to react, as the iron rod's sharp point plunged deeply through its throat. In addition, since the Black Panther's body was currently lunging in the air, its heavy body quickly dropped downwards, pushing the iron rod deeper and deeper through its neck. Eventually, the point had drilled a hole directly through, and the end had come out of the other side. This time, the Black Panther didn't even have the time to cry out before it had already died. It fell to the ground with its eyes wide open, grief instilled in its gaze. At that moment, Tai Ta finally caught up from behind. When he looked over at the ground, he saw the corroded iron rod pierce through the Black Panther's throat. Immediately, his eyes widened in extreme shock. Changyang Xiang Tian, this. Did you kill this? Tai Ta's voice was trembling in shock. Even though he had witnessed the moment that Jianchen's weapon had pierced through the Black Panther's throat, he still couldn't believe the scene no matter how hard he tried. That was because the period of time that had passed was way too short. When Jianchen had charged over, Tai Ta had already followed behind at his fastest speed. However, by the time he had caught up, all he saw was the Class 1 magical beast dying by Jianchen's hands. The amount of time that had passed was definitely not even long enough to take a breath, or even half a breath. Being able to kill a Class 1 magical beast in half a breath's time was natural for some professionals. However, Tai Ta clearly knew that Jianchen's abilities had not yet reached saint level. Moreover, the weapon he was using was a mere corroded iron rod. Jianchen placed his foot on the Black Panther's head, and gradually pulled out the iron rod. As if nothing had happened, he said, "That's right, I killed it." However, it was just a coincidence. Originally, there was no way it would have died so quickly. However, it kept approaching my weapon, and in the end, its life was extinguished before it could even cry out in despair. Hearing this, Tai Ta rubbed the back of his head, and doubtfully glanced at Jianchen's indifferent face. In disbelief, he asked, "Is that true? You're not lying to me?" Jianchen laughed, "Of course it's true. Why would I lie to you?" Seeing Jianchen's sincere expression, Tai Ta was beyond puzzled, and muttered, "Do such stupid magical beasts really exist, to actually give itself up to a weapon?" Chapter 35, Liang Shaolu taking out the Black Panther's monster core. Jianchen and Tai Ta continued on their trip to kill magical beasts. To easily kill a Class 1 magical beast while not having the strength of a saint was something that any new student would have said was an incomparably difficult task. Life-threatening dangers could happen at any time, but to Jianchen and Tai Ta, it was almost as if they were playing a game. The second region was like a treasure trove of monster cores for those two. The day passed quickly and nightfall came. Both Jianshen and Tai Ta found an open area in the forest to camp out in. Between them was a campfire with a fire that pulsed as it illuminated the pitch blackness. The two boys' shadows danced behind their backs, making their reflections seem like devils threatening each other. The darkness surrounded them from all four corners, and if they were to go outside the range of the bright fire, then they wouldn't even be able to see their own hands in front of their faces in the darkness. It wasn't that peaceful, however, as somewhere in the distant forest, a magical beast could be heard howling away. Just the sound of it would terrify anyone, and for someone who was absolutely scared already, the sound would cause them to be scared stiff. Tai Ta turned the monster core in his hand over the fire, causing the light of the fire to shine on it. One look at the two boys revealed that their clothes were not in great condition and were splattered with blood. The blood was all from magical beasts, while their clothes had been cut open due to the thorny shrubbery. Changyang Xiang Tian, you're really awesome. I didn't think that you would be able to wield a corroded iron rod to such an amazing degree. All of the magical beasts we fought against today were killed by you. It was only the initial viper from earlier that I managed to kill. Tai Ta exclaimed as he heaped praise onto Jianshen. Jianshen's face had a big smile on it. I only took a chance when I saw one. If it weren't for you dealing out damage with your axe, then it would have been even harder to kill those magical beasts. Tai Ta laughed, his heart finally taking comfort in his words. Changyang Xiang Tian, could you tell me, how is it that you're able to tell if we're near a magical beast or not? Tai Ta was naturally very curious about this. The whole day he had been puzzling over it, but it was only now that he found the perfect time to ask. Jianshen didn't bother to hide anything and instead pointed at his ear and head. I used this and this. Tai Ta looked at Jianshen point at his ears and head in a curious way before asking, you use your ears to listen and your mind to think? You're only half correct. Jianshen took the iron rod by his side and began to polish it on a small chunk of rock. Absent-mindedly responding, he said, aside from relying on my ears to listen, I use my spirit to feel my surroundings. However, this method would be too difficult for you to do. Oh. Tai Ta nodded his head in understanding while thinking it over in his head. Jianshen felt the fine point of the iron rod before putting it down. Grabbing onto his space belt, he said, Tai Ta, let us check out our earnings from today. Shaking his space belt, the stored monster cores began to fall out. One after another, monster cores started to drop out from the space belt and gradually the spot in front of Jianshen began to pile up with monster cores until it was a foot high. Tai Ta followed suit and started to shake his own space belt. In the end, a small mountain piled up in front of him as well. I have 48 monster cores here. Jianshen laughed, his profits for today had been huge. I have 49 here, I've beat you by one. Tai Ta was extremely happy, he had never seen this many cores before. This was a first for him, since he had never even seen a single monster core before. To Tai Ta, who was born in a common household, these monster cores had a huge price tag on them despite all of the cores being class 1. For the first day to be this profitable, not bad. I don't know how many monster cores we'd need in order to be the ones with the most monster cores. After all, the prize is quite rich, a class 4 monster core and a space ring. Even Jianshen had been tempted by the prizes, he really wanted that class 4 monster core, the energy inside would be many times stronger than a class 1 monster core. At this moment, Jianshen's eyes suddenly grew dark as he whispered, quickly store all of the monster cores, people are coming. After saying that, he immediately started to store all of the cores into his belt and put it back on. Tai Ta moved quickly as well. The moment he heard Jianshen start, he had already started to store all of the monster cores. Tai Ta had finished by the time Jianshen did. After the two had stored their monster cores away, after a few nervous breaths, the distant grass moved to the side with a rustling sound as a very thin person came walking out. The moment the person saw both Tai Ta and Jianshen sitting by a fire, a look of surprise came over their face before suddenly letting loose a cry of joy. It was a weak little lady holding onto a rice straw for support who came stumbling over. I finally found someone, I finally found someone. I beg of you, please don't leave me behind. I'm afraid, really afraid. The magical beasts want to eat me. The person's voice was fairly frantic and was full of panic. However, her voice was still gentle somehow. Hearing her, Jian Chen and Tai Ta then realized the person in front of them was a girl as the fire behind them illuminated her body, showing her Kargath Academy uniform to the both of them. However, the uniform had been cut open by the branches and thorns. Some parts of her body could already be seen underneath and even her underwear could be seen poking out. The uniform itself was muddy as if she had fallen multiple times. The girl's face was dirty with mud to the point where her appearance couldn't even be seen clearly. However, on her face could be seen evidence of her crying as she pleadingly looked at Jian Chen. Looking at the pitiful sight, there was nothing but helplessness reflected in her eyes. Sit down. Jian Chen tried to make himself as kind as possible. Looking at her situation, he had guessed what type of trouble had taken place. In this environment, even the most reckless of boys would feel horrified, let alone a little girl. Seeing that the person was actually a pretty girl, Tai Ta's guard loosened. Carefully putting down the battle axe in his hands, he looked at the girl curiously. Jian Chen calmly looked at the young girl, and asked, "Can you tell me what your name is?" My name is Liang Xiaolu," the young girl stuttered back. Seeing both Jian Chen's and Tai Ta's eyes flash, she could not help but feel fear, as well as some faint traces of concern and insecurity. Why is a lady like you not with others? If you're so afraid, why would you walk through this forest alone? Just a few random sounds have even scared you to such an extent, Tai Ta asked in a muffled voice. Liang Xiaolu looked at Tai Ta timidly before she said quietly, "I came here with a few friends at first, but unfortunately we came across a magical beast. That magical beast was quite strong, and my group of friends weren't able to beat it. Soon after most of us were injured and we all scattered to run away, but I got lost." Hearing this, Tai Ta began to choke on his own saliva before saying, "Even with a group you were unable to beat a Class 1 magical beast? How useless, just Changyang Xiang Tian and I have already killed over 100 magical beasts today." A proud look came over his face as he remembered that fact. Goyulu. At that moment, a strange sound suddenly rang out. In an instant, Jian Chen and Tai Ta both directed their gazes to the origin of the sound. It turned out to be Liang Xiaoli's stomach, which at the moment, still would not stop grumbling loudly. "You must be hungry," Jian Chen smiled. "Yes." Liang Xiaolu nodded in embarrassment, and delicately said, "I haven't eaten all day." The corner of her eyes could not help but light up as she glanced at the bonfire, where the finely cooked, golden magical beast meat was currently dripping with rich oils. She greedily inhaled its aroma, but the more she did this, the louder her stomach grumbled. Eventually, both Jian Chen and Tai Ta could only hear rumbling sounds in their ears. Jian Chen smiled. He picked up the skewer with the magical meat on it, and unafraid of the heat, directly used his hand to tear off a large chunk of the meat. Handing it over to Liang Xiaolu, he said, "Go on and eat this. Be careful, it's hot though." Liang Xiaolu twisted her hands, and ripped the corners of her clothes to wipe clean the dirt on her hands. Tenderly, she reached over to receive the magical beast meat. Once it had cooled down, she directly ate it with large mouthfuls, not caring to keep up her appearance in the least. Liang Xiaolu was probably starving, because after she quickly finished that large piece of meat, she still gazed at the remaining piece with a wistful look in her eyes. Jian Chen smiled, and ripped off another large chunk of magical beast meat. He handed it over to Liang Xiaolu and said, "Go ahead and eat this." Seeing the piece of magical beast meat that had placed in front of her, Liang Xiaolu hesitated for a bit, and in the end, still didn't reach out to receive it. Instead, she gazed at Jian Chen and Tai Ta and softly asked, "If I finish it, what will you guys eat?" Tai Ta laughed, "Don't worry, we still have another one left. Look under that tree." As he said this, Tai Ta extended a finger to point in the direction. Liang Xiaolu looked at where Tai Ta was pointing, and sure enough, she noticed that underneath a large tree nearby, an unknown magical beast had fallen to the ground. One of its legs had already disappeared, and the ground was covered with fresh blood marks. Staring at the magical beast's corpse, Liang Shaolu swallowed hard and said, "You guys are really formidable. To think that the two of you alone could kill a Class 1 magical beast." "Che. What does that mean?" Tai Ta said, completely unperturbed. The time stealthily flew by. Jianshen and Tai Ta had finished eating, and were now preparing to rest. "Hey, where should I sleep?" Liang Shaolu asked with difficulty. Jianshen pointed at a large tree not too far away and said, "Go rest on top of that tree. That way, even if magical beasts try to attack in the middle of the night, you won't be harmed." "Ah, magical beasts still attack during the night?" Liang Shaoli's face turned ashen at these words. Her eyes were filled with fear, and her whole body began to tremble. "Then what about you guys? Where would you guys go? You can't just leave me behind alone, otherwise I'll definitely be eaten by some savage magical beast," Liang Shaolu asked in a panicked tone. She nervously glanced at Jianshen and Tai Ta, as if afraid for her life if they ran away and abandoned her. Jianshen internally sighed. He really couldn't do anything about the cowardly Liang Shaolu. People like her who had been born and raised in noble families as a precious little girl had never experienced the stormy sea. From birth, she had grown up into a sheltered environment, so encountering any danger drove her heart and mind into disarray. "Don't worry, we won't go far. We're just going to rest in the other tree over there," Jianshen said. Liang Shaolu felt slightly comforted after hearing these words. However, traces of fear still remained in her heart, refusing to go away. That damned school, that damned headmaster. Why do they have to force everyone to attend this type of event for no reason at all? Isn't this just deliberately trying to send us to our deaths? Whenever she thought about how she had gotten into her current situation, Liang Shaolu could not help but start cursing in anger. Eventually her words gradually began to turn into sobs. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.